A ragged peasant boy stands over his grandfather's body. The old man wasn't just killed, he was hacked clean in two. Julian stares down, but the tears just won't come. His only living relative is gone, yet he feels nothing. As their humble cottage burns to ash, Julian watches the flames, wondering if he's just a soulless monster. He remembers a better day, coming home with a rare spirit bloom herb gripped tightly in his hand. Silas beamed with pride, impressed his grandson found the plant exactly where the old maps said it would be. The old man estimated the herb's worth in gold, while Julian mentioned finding a fox den nearby. Silas grew worried, asking if the boy had dealt with the defenseless cubs while the mother was away. Julian shook his head, saying killing the young would only break the mother's heart. Silas was relieved. "Good lad," the old man said, "now set your things aside for supper." Then his voice turned grave. Julian listened as Silas made him swear a blood oath. Never, under any circumstance, reveal his true nature to anyone. Back in the present, Julian looks at the bloodied remains and whispers an apology. He reaches for his rusted scythe. That promise, it's dead. Julian lets out a primal roar that echoes through the valley, the sound of a demon born. Months later in the kingdom of Valoria, a heavy iron carriage rattles through the cobblestone streets, packed with broken men. The citizens jeer at the captured bandits and cutthroats, but one cage stands apart from the rest. The mob screams for blood as a mysterious figure watches from a high window, eyeing the lone prisoner. Inside that single cage is a boy, battered and bound in heavy chains, but his eyes, they're terrifyingly calm. The man at the window sips his wine, noting the prisoner looks no older than the young Duke himself. His companion warns him, never judge a wolf by its age. This kid is likely the most dangerous monster in the lot. Why else would they keep him under separate lock and key? A fat merchant in silk robes scoffs at the idea. He reveals the boy's grim title, the Scythe Wraith, a name earned through a string of brutal massacres. The knight in the feathered hat isn't impressed, dismissing Julian as nothing more than a common street thug. "What are you looking for?" the merchant asks. The knight replies, "A candidate, young, lethal, and someone whose death nobody will mourn." Suddenly, a rock cracks against Julian's skull. The attacker screams that even hell is too good for him. As the insults rain down like stones, Julian just sits there, silent and unmoving, absorbing the hatred. That's when the knight's eyes widen. He sees it now, the cold, unbreakable focus beneath the filth. Recognizing the raw potential in the blood-soaked boy, the knight stands up abruptly, canceling his previous search. The merchant mocks Julian's pretty, feminine face, but the knight is already moving, his mind made up. He leaves the merchant shouting for answers as he marches straight toward the prison transport. He's found him, the perfect weapon. Julian is exactly the kind of ghost he needs to hire. Deep within the dungeons of Blackwood Castle, the security is suffocating. Armed guards pace the halls. Alone in the dark, Julian curses his own carelessness. His mind drifts back to the man he despises most. He remembers the killer's cold grip on his throat. Impressive, the monster had hissed for a mere child. Julian had hunted them for weeks, but this man was an absolute nightmare in human form. Despite all his training, Julian had been crushed effortlessly by his grandfather's butcher. The gap in power was a canyon. If they fought again now, the result would be the same. Julian is stuck, searching for a way, any way, to bridge that gap. The killer's mockery rings in his ears, just a child. Then a single thought takes hold, martial arts. Could mastering the blade give him the vengeance he craves? He almost laughs. Where would a peasant like him even learn? Suddenly, a strange, sweet-smelling mist begins to crawl across the stone floor and into his cell. Julian's nose twitches. Years of gathering herbs with Silas kick in. This isn't smoke, and it's definitely not fire. He starts breaking down the scent instantly. Lizard's tongue, purple parsnip. The composition is complex. As the guards outside start to wobble and slump, Julian identifies the final trigger: concentrated valerian root. Sleeping gas. Even as his own vision begins to blur, the young herbalist realizes someone is making their move. The heavy iron door creaks open. A figure shadows the entrance, stepping into the cage of the beast. It's the knight in the hat. He's using the alchemical mist to spirit away his perfect candidate under the cover of sleep. But the moment the chains fall away, Julian's eyes snap open. He moves, and the knight, he realizes he's playing with fire. Silas wasn't sleeping, not for a second. He was faking it, waiting for a gap, but before he could even react, the soldier's fist slammed into his gut. A brutal blow. Silas saw his opening and bolted, his heart hammering as he tried to put distance between him and his captors. The sleeping gas was a joke, a total failure that kept the boy wide awake, and he wasn't about to waste this chance to escape. Then, thud, his body suddenly locked up as the man in the hat struck his back with terrifying precision, hitting every vital nerve. Paralyzed, just like that, Silas couldn't move a muscle, wondering if this was some kind of legendary high-level combat art. The kidnapper didn't hesitate, throwing his prize into a stone wall like he was nothing but a bag of bones. Silas realized he was dealing with a master warrior, and a terrifying thought hit him. Was this the man who murdered his grandfather? They looked the same, but something was off. This killer had a jagged, nasty scar slashed across his left eye. Suddenly, a new figure stepped forward, asking the guard, Alaric, if Silas was the perfect double for their plan. A man in a veil stepped into the light, complaining that the dungeon was nothing but a smelly, boring hole. The noble ordered Alaric to fetch a chair and force the prisoner up so he could finally get a good look at his face. Alaric shoved Silas into the seat with zero mercy. The noble lifted his veil, and Silas felt his blood turn to ice. It was like looking into a mirror. The young master was a perfect, identical copy of Silas, down to every last detail. "Destiny," the noble laughed, enjoying the sheer shock written all over his double's face. Then came the cold, hard truth. The young master revealed that Silas was scheduled to be executed in exactly 2 days. Lord Julian mocked the situation, pointing out how unjust life was. One of them was a lord, the other a dead man walking. Silas stayed silent, but Julian wasn't finished. He had a proposal that would change everything. A rare, dangerous opportunity. Julian offered Silas the chance to replace him as the heir of the great Sterling Manor. Silas could hardly believe it. A total life swap. The young inmate stared, caught off guard by the sheer insanity of the offer. Julian promised a life of pure luxury, fine wine, soft beds, and beautiful servants, things Silas had never even tasted. And the best part, once the job was done, Silas would get a fortune large enough to buy his freedom anywhere in the world. Alaric held out a small red candy, the seal for their little agreement. Silas narrowed his eyes. "Is it poison?" he asked, to which Alaric gave a blunt, honest answer. It was an insurance policy, a safety measure to keep a dangerous prisoner on a short, tight leash. Alaric promised the antidote would be waiting at the finish line, then waited for the boy's final answer. Silas thought of his dead grandfather and the second chance standing right in front of him. He swallowed the candy. Julian's face twisted into an evil, predatory grin. The scythe demon was officially back in play. A chance for revenge. Silas kept his face stony and unreadable as the poison slid down his throat. "Will I really get my second chance?" Silas asked, his voice low and dangerous. Julian praised his choice and ordered Alaric to unlock the shackles and release the paralyzing strikes. The pressure was gone. The chains fell. Silas was finally free to move again, and the relief was electric. Alaric told his master to follow from behind as he led the way toward the exit of the dark dungeon. He ordered Silas to walk in front, clearing the path with the confidence of a man who thought he was in control. Big mistake. In a flash of pure violence, Silas grabbed the young master's face and snapped his neck like a dry twig. Alaric watched in pure, unadulterated horror as Lord Julian's lifeless body slumped onto the cold stone floor. Silas just looked at him with a devious, bloodthirsty smile. "Oops, my hand slipped. What's next, Captain?" This was the true demon. the one who had previously turned a burning building into a literal slaughterhouse. Before the law could catch him, he had walked through the flames carrying a severed head, loving every second of it. He had butchered everyone in that room with his scythe, taking a sick, twisted pleasure in the carnage. A manic smile had cracked across his face as he hunted down everyone he thought was involved in his master's death. As he looked at the blood painting the floor, Silas realized the truth. The massacre brought him genuine joy. He remembered his grandfather's warning about his true nature, the darkness that lived deep inside his soul. His scythe was drenched in red. He tossed the head aside, wondering why he felt so alive in the middle of all that death. His hands were stained with blood. Lost in his own dark thoughts, the demon was surprised to find himself smiling. He remembered his grandfather's final words and finally understood this wasn't just a choice. This was exactly who he was. The last survivor crawled through the mud, begging for mercy. For a split second, Julian, the blood-scythe rogue, actually wondered if he was the monster they said he was. The killer stared at his hands, doubting his own soul, but the bloodlust quickly took over again as he prepared to finish the job. Then, everything changed. Out of nowhere, boom, a massive kick to the gut. A mysterious knight appeared like a ghost, sending Julian flying across the room and smashing into the stone wall. He hit the timber beams with bone-shattering force. As the young rogue struggled to even breathe, the knight just stood there, watching him with cold, curious eyes. While the survivor scrambled away, the scarred warrior stepped into the light. He was genuinely shocked to see Julian still clinging to life. "Spectacular," he muttered. Julian couldn't even manage a whisper. His lungs were on fire, and his mind was racing as he stared up at the man who had just dismantled him with a single move. One look at that scar told Julian everything he needed to know. This wasn't just a soldier. This man was a walking death sentence. Then, the knight dropped into a perfect duelist stance. The scarred commander saw right through him. Julian might be a demon to the common folk, but to a master of the blade, he was just an untrained brat with a weapon. In a blur of steel, the swordsman lunged. He shouted that the demon had somehow survived his ultimate strike, but he wasn't planning on letting it happen twice. Julian let out a pained grunt as a hand clamped around his throat like a vice. He couldn't believe it. This man had crossed the entire room in the blink of an eye. The knight, Sir Alistair, was confused. He'd been tracking a legendary threat, but instead, he found an inexperienced kid who didn't know the first thing about real combat. Alistair confessed he expected a monster, but finding a total novice was much more interesting. Julian tried to speak, but he never got the chance. Before the boy could even ask who this man was, the knight's blade drove deep into his stomach. Julian's world tilted as the cold steel pierced through him. He buckled, coughing up a spray of crimson. Alistair looked almost impressed. Most men would be dead 10 times over after taking a direct hit like that. The knight twisted the blade, his voice dropping to a low growl. He decided right then and there that this demon had to be purged from the kingdom before he grew any stronger. He told Julian he should have stayed in the shadows and lived a quiet life. But his crimes had finally caught up to him, and now it was time to pay the toll. Julian was completely outmatched by the very man who had executed his grandfather years ago. As his vision blurred, he realized this was the end of his short, bloody road. He felt himself slipping away, heading for the darkness. But fate is a funny thing. Julian didn't wake up in the afterlife. He woke up in a dungeon awaiting execution. He lay there, broken and beaten, wishing for just one more shot at life. This time, he swore to himself, he wouldn't lose. He'd grab destiny by the throat and never let go. Fast forward, and Julian isn't a prisoner anymore. He's a weapon. Captain Garrett stood frozen in shock as Julian suddenly snapped the neck of Lord Cedric of House Stirling. The body of the young noble hit the floor with a heavy thud. Julian just stood there with a twisted, maniacal grin, looking up at the captain who had been watching him. "The fake is dead," Julian whispered, his eyes glowing with bloodlust. "So, Captain, what's our next move?" He was practically vibrating with dark energy. Garrett lost it. He lunged forward, grabbing Julian by the neck and slamming him into the wall. He was furious that his stand-in had just murdered the heir to the manor. "Do you have a death wish?" the captain roared, but Julian just laughed. He pointed out that his whole job was to be the replacement, the decoy for the real master. As Julian gripped the captain's hand, his smile sharpened. He knew Garrett's secret. Following the rules blindly was a one-way ticket to a shallow grave. Garrett's eyes widened. This kid's strength was unreal. He tried to shake the boy's grip, realization finally hitting him that Julian was way more dangerous than he looked. The captain growled, asking if Julian wasn't terrified of being executed right here. But the rogue just called his bluff with terrifying accuracy. Julian knew there was no love lost between the captain and the dead lord. That was the only reason Julian was still breathing, and they both knew it. Garrett didn't want to hear the truth. He slammed the boy onto the floor, trying to reclaim some sense of control as Julian lay there, completely unfazed. The captain drew a hidden dagger, the steel glinting coldly. He looked down at the boy with murder in his eyes, promising to end this farce once and for all. Julian didn't flinch. He just asked a simple question. Is my death really the only way this ends, or can we be more creative? Garrett paused, intrigued despite himself. Give me one good reason to spare your miserable life, he demanded, the dagger hovering inches from Julian's throat. Julian laid it out. Garrett held the only antidote to the poison in his blood. They were bonded by survival now. If Garrett betrayed House Sterling, Julian would be his perfect pawn. The rogue's grin told the captain everything. He was offering a deal with the devil. Garrett went silent, the weight of the choice hanging heavy in the air. Then the captain made his move. He lunged with the dagger, the sound of a sharp stab echoing through the stone room as the blade found its mark. Julian didn't even blink. The knife was buried deep in the floor, just a hair's breadth from his cheek. Garrett had made his choice. The captain sheathed his weapon and looked Julian in the eye. Fine. From this moment on, your name is Lord Cedric Sterling III. Don't make me regret this. A dark, jagged smile cracked across Julian's face. Revenge was finally on the menu, and his eyes burned with the promise of the bloodbath to come. But Garrett wasn't done. He laid down the laws. Julian was a ghost in this manner. No talking to the staff, no wandering the halls, and absolutely no mistakes. Julian shrugged. A puppet is still a puppet, after all. But the captain reminded him that if he got caught, the poison in his veins would kill him long before the hangman's noose. The puppet master had one final warning that made Julian's ears perk up. This was a game of life and death, and the stakes were about to get much higher. Try to rebel, and I'll end you myself before you can even take a breath, Garrett threatened. Julian just maintained that blank, unsettling smile. Garrett muttered about how creepy the kid was before tossing him the daily neutralizer, the only thing keeping the shadow blight poison from melting his heart. As dawn broke over Sterling Manor, the golden light hit the stone walls. Julian watched the sun rise, thinking about the insane streak of luck he just had. Not only had he survived that encounter with the scarred knight, but he'd just been handed the keys to an entire noble house. Now, the real fun begins. Meet Julian, the scythe fiend. He's alive only because his old mentor sacrificed everything, and now he's sworn a blood oath never to rest. Revenge. That's the only thing fueling him since they discovered old Mordecai's cold, lifeless body in the dirt. The scarred knight probably thinks Julian is just another rotting corpse, but this demon boy is already plotting his next move. It's time for the blade to do the talking. Word is, the third young lord of House Blackwood belongs to a legendary martial clan. Julian's plan: step into the dead boy's boots, infiltrate the manor, and steal their secret techniques. But the real goal? Find the monster who butchered his grandfather. Julian still sees it when he closes his eyes, the broken, severed state they left the old man in. A dark, twisted smile creeps across his face. He wants to tear that scarred knight limb from limb, exactly like he did to the only family Julian ever had. High noon. Julian finishes his meal, actually feeling a spark of gratitude for surviving the night. This is his one shot to master the knightly arts, but something's off. Something is bothering our boy. The guard that the puppet master, Lord Alastair, placed at the door is becoming a massive headache. Sir Gawain, Alastair's top disciple, is hovering like a vulture. Gawain is fuming. He thinks his master's gone soft, wondering what's so special about this ignorant demon who doesn't know a sword from a plowshare. When the news hit that the real young lord was dead, Gawain lost his mind. He panicked, demanding to know the new plan. Alastair just cut him off with a sharp shush. Cold. "Keep your mouth shut," the master commanded. "The orders haven't changed. Watch the demon boy. Keep him locked in that room until a new strategy is carved out." But Alastair's already planning to toss Julian to the wolves. He's looking for the exit strategy. The plan: betray everyone and join the enemy's side once the boy is out of the way. Gawain points out the obvious: Julian is riddled with poison. The disciple thinks the boy is too weak to fight back, but as he brings up the dead body, Alastair stops him cold. "The boy is different," the master claims. Alastair knows the truth. This demon boy is a rebel, a quick-thinking predator. "I mean, the kid snapped the third lord's neck just to steal his life. That's not a puppet, that's a monster." As they walk, the master warns him, tangling with a slaughtering fiend is a death sentence. Gawain just scoffs. He's annoyed he's babysitting a poisoned brat who can't even hold a sword. He can't defy his master, so Gawain just stands there, tapping his foot in pure frustration. Inside the room, Julian hears it, the rhythmic asterisk tap, tap, tap on the floor. He's curious. Why leave only one guard if I'm supposed to be a high-stakes stand-in? A few days pass, and the fake master starts to get the vibe of the manor. It's safe. Way too safe to actually need a body double. That leaves one big question. What is his real role in this game? Julian is suspicious. He knows Alastair won't give him the truth, but then, a grin spreads across his face. The crazy kid finally realizes the play. The puppet master is planning to defect to the enemy. Outside, Gawain is still at it, but even knights get tired. The disciple falls asleep standing up. Suddenly, the door creaks open. Gawain snaps awake, confused. "Bathroom run, kid." Julian just looks at him. "No, I need a walk, and I've got questions." The guard's temper explodes. "Get back in that room, brat, or I'll beat you into the floor." Gawain lunges, grabbing the imposter by the collar. Julian doesn't flinch. "Look, we can keep this between us," he says calmly. Wham! Gawain slams the puppet against the stone wall. "Back in the room, now," he barks. "Stop acting so arrogant. Triggering me is the last thing you want to do." Julian stands there, silent for a heartbeat. Then he whispers, "You know, your master is much stronger than his student." Before Gawain can process the insult, Julian's hand flashes out. He grabs the guard's shoulder and flips the man right over his head. Crash! Gawain hits the ground hard, pinned. Julian isn't done. He goes straight for the pressure points. The guard is paralyzed. He can't believe it. How does a martial arts nobody know how to seal pressure points? Now he sees it. Julian isn't a newbie, but Julian is surprised too. Did I mess it up? He wonders. Maybe I copied Alastair's move wrong. Gawain's heart drops. He copied asterisk it, just by seeing it once. That's when the realization hits. Alastair was right. This boy isn't a puppet, he's a nightmare. Terrified, Gawain tries his last card, the poison. "You've got venom in your veins. Without the antidote, you'll die screaming." He begs for his release, but Julian just reaches out. He grabs Gawain's face, cold and calculated. "What are you doing?" the guard gasps. Julian doesn't answer. He just bites his own index finger until it bleeds. The scythe fiend leans in and lets a single drop of his blood fall into the guard's mouth. Gawain starts to suffocate. He's horrified to realize that Julian's very blood has become a weapon. It's pure poison. While the guard desperately tries to purge the toxin with his inner energy, Julian just watches. "I spent years as an apothecary's assistant," the demon boy whispers. "I've tasted every poison there is." And with that, he delivers one final, brutal kick. Alastair dropped a bombshell. His blood was pure toxin, a souvenir from his dark past. He could sniff out herbs in a brew like a bloodhound and claimed poison couldn't touch him. all while wearing a chilling, devilish smirk. With a cold laugh, he told the guard he didn't need any cure. Once his face returned to normal, he squeezed Gavin for information on Blackwood Manor. Alastair was the only one who could stop the poison in the guard's veins, so the terrified Gavin had no choice but to obey a man he thought was a literal demon. It was a clear day at the Iron Rose Manor, but inside the main hall, the atmosphere was suffocating. In the master's quarters, Lord Alaric Blackwood was coughing his life away, confined to his bed. The head physician was spiraling into despair. Despite his status, he was completely powerless to find the source of the Lord's mysterious decline. No matter the herbs or ancient texts he used, the doctor was stumped. He privately thought it would have been smarter for the Lord to name a successor ages ago. Because Lord Alaric hadn't chosen one of his 4 sons to take the throne before falling ill, the manor was now a ticking time bomb. The silence in the halls was just the calm before a very bloody storm. Those 4 sons were ready to kill for their father's position. According to the physician, the first wife was already making moves. Lady Beatrice was obsessed with her eldest son, 𝒆'𝒔, and was rumored to be using some very dark methods to ensure he inherited the crown. The doctor nearly jumped out of his skin when Lady Beatrice herself walked in to check on her husband. As the servants bowed, she demanded another update. The doctor could only hang his head and apologize, admitting he couldn't cure this unknown sickness. It was exactly what she expected. Seeing that modern medicine was useless, Beatrice decided to turn to the occult, a move that absolutely horrified the old doctor. He tried to warn her that shamanistic rituals were just dangerous foolery, but Lady Beatrice cut him off mid-sentence. She wasn't about to watch her husband rot without trying everything, even the forbidden arts. The doctor tried to defend his reputation, but it was over for him. As the guards dragged him out, the first wife informed him that his services were no longer required. Her mind was made up, and the occultist was already on his way. Lady Beatrice ordered her soldiers to seal the main hall. No one was to enter while the ritual was in progress. With a grim, bone-chilling tone, she made it clear, no exceptions. Meanwhile, Gavin finished briefing Alastair on the mess inside the manor. Alastair took a moment to let the chaos sink in. The scythe demon turned to Gavin and asked if they were ready to move. The curious guard asked where they were going, though the answer was obvious. Looking out the window with a calculating gaze, Alastair decided it was time to pay the dying Lord Alaric a visit. Once outside, Alastair guessed the real game. The family wanted to use him as a puppet to provoke the eldest son, 𝒆'𝒔, into a fatal showdown. Gavin confirmed it. The plan was a brutal masterstroke of political theater. 𝒆'𝒔 was a 20-year-old brute, marked by a scar on his left cheek and a legendary appetite for wine and women. He was a greedy, cruel man who spent nearly every waking hour in the local taverns. Then there was the second son, Upton. He was 18, sharp-eyed, and just as ruthless as his mother. The strategy was for the second son to kill the imposter, Alastair, only to be stabbed in the back by his older brother immediately after. They wanted the 2 eldest to engage in a fight to the death, a move known as winning by default. In the end, it didn't matter who survived the duel. They would both be disqualified for kinslaying. This would leave the third son, Gideon, as the only pure option to lead the house. It was a perfect plan, right up until Alastair unexpectedly ended Gideon's life. Gavin nervously asked why they needed to see the Lord. Alastair's logic was simple. If the old man died now, it would trigger the brothers' war too soon. The guard tried to warn him about the danger, but Alastair just gave him a look that screamed, "Shut up." He indirectly threatened Gavin, telling him to keep this visit a total secret, which, of course, terrified the poor guy. Back at the manor, Lady Beatrice was waiting outside the inner sanctum as an old man approached the gates. This was Malachi, a mysterious sage known for his mastery of the occult. Beatrice decided to give him one chance based on the dark rumors she'd heard. Malachi thanked her, insisting the master needed immediate treatment. He claimed that to purge the misfortune, everyone nearby had to leave. Beatrice had already cleared the area, leaving only a few trusted guards. But Malachi insisted even she should leave. As he walked toward the door, she whispered a reminder about their secret deal. He wasn't just there to heal. He was tasked with stealing the family's secret combat manual and the Lord's official seal. The reward for the theft, 300 gold sovereigns. Malachi gave a greedy nod before the lady dismissed every remaining witness. Originally, she hadn't wanted to resort to these dark shadows, but suddenly, something caught her attention. Young Arthur, the fourth son born to Lady Alara, had finally drawn the dangerous gaze of the Duchess. A simple affair with an artist, the Duchess could forgive that, but an illegitimate son taking the lordship, never. As the Duchess swept away, Alaric, the pretender, watched with intrigue, just as Cedric the guard finally arrived. Alaric spotted a young boy in the yard. Cedric explained it was Julian, the Lord's youngest, busy training. Julian was the chosen heir, inheriting his father's fierce nature through brutal work and a natural gift for the blade. Watching the boy struggle, Alaric scoffed. Was this pathetic display of training actually supposed to be swordsmanship? Cedric clarified. The boy was tempering his core, the foundation of every knight, through the grueling horse stance. The fake noble understood. Then he dropped a bomb. Could Cedric help him kill the legendary Commander Thorn? Cedric froze. He couldn't believe his ears. Was this boy really asking if knightly arts could slay a master? The guard was rattled. This genius had already unraveled his master's secret plot, but he was missing something vital. Cedric explained that true power isn't just muscle. It's based on internal mana cultivation, which piqued Alaric's interest. It was all about the breath of life, drawing energy from nature and gathering it within to grow stronger. But mana isn't forged in a day. Even with noble arts, beating Commander Thorn's years of power was a fantasy. Thorn had decades of accumulated mana and lethal techniques. Taking him down, practically a suicide mission. Alaric admitted an early kill was impossible. Cedric agreed, a smug, dark look creeping across his face. The guard secretly laughed. There was no way this revenant could ever hope to defeat a giant like Thorn. You only have a small window, ages 5 to 9, to start mana training before negative energy corrupts the soul. Cedric assumed the boy was already too old. He smiled inwardly, mocking his young master's pointless struggle for power. He watched with hidden contempt as the boy prepared to try the impossible. Then, the atmosphere shifted. Alaric's eyes suddenly went cold, dead. Cedric felt a surge of pure alarm as he stared into those hollow pupils. "I really want to pierce those greedy eyes of yours," Alaric whispered. Then he smiled, demanding Cedric become his man. Terrified, Cedric accepted. Alaric knew Thorn was a wall he couldn't climb yet, and trust was still a luxury. Cedric suggested they leave before dawn. Apparently, the fourth son had a burning hatred for the third brother. Why the hate? Cedric explained that Julian had insulted Arthur's mother, earning him a brutal, bloody thrashing. Alaric actually laughed at that. He mockingly called the youngest a kind soul for leaving his brother's limbs attached. Cedric urged his new master to move now before more trouble found them, and the pretender finally agreed. Meanwhile, young Julian remained alone in the dirt, focused entirely on the agonizing fire of his training. Sunset arrived. Inside the manor's inner sanctum, the air grew heavy, thick with red strings and silver charms. Archmage Malachi bound the Lord's limbs in a crimson web. A dark, foul energy was rotting inside the nobleman's chest. The Lord's bloodlust was staggering, enough to kill a normal man instantly. Only a true knight could hold such malice. Because this murderous energy had festered for so long, the Lord only had a 50-50 shot at surviving the night. But the Archmage didn't care about survival. He only cared about the grim task assigned by the Duchess. Malachi gripped a brush soaked in blood-red ink. He began his incantation, the ancient words hanging in the air. The chanting grew louder as he finished scribing the runic talisman, his movements frantic and precise. With a roar, he hurled the magic seal toward the curse. The paper slammed into the Lord's very core. Light erupted. The sorcerer twisted his hands in a complex 𝒆'�, trying to purge the evil from the Lord's mind. But nothing happened. Malachi pushed harder, intensifying the spell as the shadows refused to break. He poured everything into his magic words, but his heart sank. Only a tiny fraction of the darkness was leaving. The curse was too strong. Desperate, Malachi shifted his stance, casting the ultimate prayer of enlightenment. Lord Barrett's eyes suddenly flared a demonic red. He let out a guttural grunt of pure, unadulterated pain. Snap, one of the binding strings shattered. Malachi panicked. Had someone dared to enter the room during the ritual? This was the most dangerous moment. Any distraction now would mean a total collapse of the seal. Suddenly, boom, a blast of pure murderous intent erupted from the Lord, throwing the Archmage across the stone floor. The old man went skidding, finally stopping at the feet of a stranger. Malachi looked up in pure terror. He gasped at the sudden presence, while the guard stepped forward, demanding to know what the hell was happening. Arthur was stunned seeing the Duke in such a pathetic state, while the old wizard feigned total ignorance as the young lord closed in. Then, out of nowhere, the Reaper of the East clasped his hands together, greeting the room with a chilling, toothy grin. Master Mycroft stood there, frozen. He couldn't believe this supposed third young lord was smiling while his father withered in agony. Talk about cold-blooded. The boy actually gave a polite nod to the father of the man he'd just slaughtered. Outside, a shouting match erupted as Mycroft tried to bar the door, claiming the Duchess herself had ordered that no one, not even the heir, enter. Gawain was fuming, but the old man doubled down, shouting that the Duke's condition would only worsen if exposed to their dark intent. That's when the light bulb went off for Gawain. He realized Mycroft wasn't just a priest, but a forbidden alchemist. The wizard started begging them to leave, practically shaking, until a sickening gulping sound from the bed stopped everyone cold. Arthur and Gawain leaned in, intrigued, while the alchemist looked like he'd seen a ghost as the Duke began to drool uncontrollably. This wasn't just a fever. The Duke's eyes snapped open, glowing a hellish red, and he screamed as the holy sigil on his chest burned away. Pure, unadulterated dark mana erupted, lifting the Duke's body off the bed as the possession took complete control. Panicking, the wizard screamed at the two intruders to hold the cursed lord down so the crimson array wouldn't shatter. The darkness was winning, drowning the Duke's soul by the second, while Arthur and Gawain struggled to pin down the possessed man. Mycroft slammed a parchment sigil onto the Duke's forehead, desperately trying to suck the evil out and cure the rot. But the shadow inside wasn't going down without a fight, literally tearing the Duke's body apart before the man suddenly lunged for Gawain. In a flash of terrifying speed, the Duke grabbed Gawain's arm and snapped it like a dry twig. The poor guy's scream filled the room. Mycroft yelled that the curse had granted the Duke supernatural strength, just as one of the ritual's pillars crumbled into dust. He warned them both to stay back. This kind of dark energy is a parasite, looking for a new host to jump into. Gawain's blood ran cold, and just as he tried to pull away, the black rot began to crawl from the Duke's hand toward his own. He was trapped, watching the darkness creep inches away from his skin, but then Julian moved. Right as the infection was about to claim Gawain, the young lord appeared from the shadows with a blade gleaming in his hand. Then he did the unthinkable. He swung his sword and lopped the Duke's arm clean off. The wizard and the guard were absolutely speechless. While the others were busy losing their minds, Julian noticed the severed limb trying to slither back toward its original host. Honestly, the Reaper looked like he was actually enjoying this, and he hacked at the limb again to keep it away from the Duke. Gawain was terrified. The boy he was guarding was a straight-up maniac for mutilating the lord of the manor like that. The cursed arm was still twitching on the floor like a dying fish, until Mycroft managed to slap a sealing charm on it. While Gawain scrambled to stop the Duke from bleeding out, the wizard was silently spiraling, trying to find a way out of this mess. He decided it was time to bolt before he took the fall for failing to secure the family's secret treasures. But just as he turned to make a run for it, he felt the cold bite of a blade pressed right against his throat. Mycroft started shaking, stammering for an explanation, while Julian silenced a confused Gawain with a single look. The son leaned in, his voice like ice, asking which specific demon was responsible for his father's state. The old man pointed at the Duke, claiming he was still in grave danger and that they were wasting precious time. He warned Julian to stop, unless he also wanted the great martial artist to drop dead right then and there. Wait, Mycroft realized his mistake the second the word also left his mouth, and you bet Julian caught it too. The Reaper's eyes narrowed. He asked if the wizard's employer was the one who didn't care if the Duke lived or died. The wizard tried to lie, but the blade drew a thin line of red on his neck. Julian wasn't playing games anymore. Finally, the old man cracked, confessing that it was Lady Seraphina who didn't care about her husband's survival. Gawain was floored. The Duchess was after the ancient grimoire, and the family crest this whole time. While Julian wondered what those items actually were, Gawain couldn't wrap his head around the lady's betrayal. It made no sense. The eldest son was already the guaranteed successor, so why go this far and risk everything? Gawain whispered to his master that they had to save the Duke, if only to stop the eldest son from seizing the throne. He warned Julian that the Duchess would definitely eliminate him once her husband was finally out of the picture. Julian just shrugged. He'd already blown her plan to pieces anyway, and that's when Mycroft swore he'd help save the Duke. But Julian just shook his head and told the old man to keep going with his original task, leaving him completely baffled. The plan. Julian was going to let Mycroft lead him straight to the hidden grimoire and the Duke's crest. Everyone was floored by the new master's choice. Alistair, the high priest, warned this could cost Lord Julian his very life. But Julian didn't flinch. Meanwhile, Sir Gareth watched from the shadows, convinced Julian was a total lunatic with some hidden scheme. Silence took over the room. The old priest used the remaining crimson binding to tether the cursed arm to a simple wooden doll. Julian asked what the point was. Alistair explained it. The doll acted as a decoy vessel, tricking the shadow wraith. The goal? To make the spirit think the doll was the Lord, absorbing the lethal energy that would have killed the real master. Time to start. The priest began his low, rhythmic chanting, filling the air with heavy tension. As the incantation grew louder, the dark presence crawled up the silver wire. Suddenly, a monstrous hand erupted from the severed arm, clutching the decoy. Lord Cedric's eyes flared with an eerie blue light as he let out a bone-chilling scream. Absolutely terrifying. Julian and his men were frozen in shock. As the priest pushed the spell, those demonic hands started crushing the wooden doll into splinters. Not good. The priest realized the wraith's bloodlust was off the charts. One wrong move and that thing would be running loose. He needed a solution, and fast, but he knew the boy with the blade would not just go along with a dangerous gamble. Then Alistair saw his opening. A cold, calculating smile flickered across the priest's face. He had a plan. He claimed he could finish the exorcism now, but insisted the guards had to leave. Sir Gareth hesitated. Eventually, the knight stepped out, feeling like something was seriously off. With the room clear, the old man prepared for the real show. He poured every ounce of his magic into the ritual this time. No holding back. The stakes were too high. Suddenly, the shadow spoke. Using the Lord's own voice, the entity addressed them. Alistair was thrilled. The ritual worked. He demanded answers, which actually seemed to amuse the monster. The priest used the ritual's power to squeeze the truth out. He forced the wraith to reveal where the secret manual and the Lord's seal were hidden. The spirit fought it, struggling to keep its secrets. But it broke. The entity confessed they were hidden deep underground, past the stone doors of the royal infirmary. Now both the priest and his accomplice knew exactly where the prize was. But then, the magic started to fail. The charm began tearing away from the doll. Alistair watched in horror as the spirit's hand completely pulverized the decoy. "Cut the wire, now!" the priest yelled at Julian. The spirit was already climbing the line to reclaim Lord Cedric's body. In a flash of steel, Julian sliced the string. But then, the unthinkable happened. Those shadowy hands reached out and grabbed Julian's ankles. The boy froze, confused, as the darkness began crawling up his own legs. He looked at Alistair, eyes wide with betrayal. The priest just smiled, a dark, twisted grin. The shadow swallowed Julian whole. As the old man slapped a binding charm on the boy, Julian vanished into the darkness. This was the plan all along. Alistair knew the Wraith's murderous intent would make it escape, so he needed a better cage. He felt incredibly lucky. He had just used the demon boy as the perfect new vessel for the spirit. Alistair won. He had the treasures, and he had just framed Julian for the entire disaster. 2 birds, 1 stone. Inside the darkness, Julian was paralyzed. The Wraith shifted, turning into a thick, oily slime of pure rage. The spirit was livid. It was not about to forgive the one who tried to trap it in a wooden toy. It assumed Julian was the one who tricked it, but looking at his youthful body, the monster was actually delighted. Julian was destined to be a prisoner in his own mind, while the Wraith took over his young, powerful form. Suddenly, the scene shifted. Julian was in a peaceful, sunny meadow, wearing his old, tattered clothes. He recognized the spot, the old watering hole near the mountains. It was his favorite place to rest. Every detail of the mountain was etched into his memory. He had spent his whole life here as a simple herbalist. He started filling his buckets, but something felt wrong. The air felt alien. A strange, hollow sensation grew in his chest. He felt like he was forgetting something vital. Then, he saw it, dark smoke billowing up behind the trees. Fire, and it was coming from his home. Julian dropped everything and sprinted toward the smoke. He ran until his lungs burned, praying to any god who would listen for his grandfather's safety. He just wanted his only family to be okay, but as he reached the clearing, he froze. It was a nightmare. Julian rushed to his grandfather, only to find the old man literally torn in half. He tried to wake him, shaking the body, screaming in denial. Who would do this? Why? In that moment of pure agony, Julian finally realized the truth about the old man. He finally understood just how much he loved his only family, and that is when the spirit found exactly what it was looking for. A broken young man. The shadow wraith sensed the raw, aching void deep within Julian's heart, and the malice decided to strike. It began to warp his mind. Corrupt energy coiled around Julian's head like a physical weight, and then a voice, familiar, calling out to him, asking what he was doing. As the darkness clouded his vision, Julian froze. He knew that voice. It was his legendary grandfather, Lord Alaric. The old lord was pleading for help. "Hurry, Julian," he cried. The boy's heart hammered. Could his own eyes really be trusted? It felt so real. The wraith's dark fog completely hijacked Julian's senses, and he lunged forward to hold the confused old man. Alaric stumbled, nearly falling, and asked why his grandson was suddenly being so affectionate. Julian couldn't find the words. He just clung to him. Tears spilled over. Julian truly believed his protector, the man who had kept him alive through the kingdom's fall, was finally back for good. But it was a lie. The shadow wraith lurked in the corners of his mind, laughing while the illusion of Alaric embraced the grieving boy. Pure cruelty. The wraith gloated over its handiwork, twisting Julian's most sacred memories into a weapon of happiness that was actually a cage. As Julian looked up, he asked why he was named after the ancient code of valor. He wanted to hear the story one last time. The trap was closing. The malicious entity watched from the shadows, admiring how easily the righteous boy had succumbed to the deception. But then, wait, Julian's gaze shifted. He looked directly at the wraith's hiding spot with a coldness that made the spirit's blood run cold. Julian reached out and snatched the spirit right by its throat. "You," he growled, "you made me remember something incredibly painful." The wraith was paralyzed with shock. How could a mortal see it? Julian was beyond furious that this parasite dared use his grandfather's image. He gritted his teeth in agony, but his grip only tightened. Julian told the trembling spirit that it had made one fatal mistake in its calculation. If it really wanted to satisfy his hunger for joy and vengeance, it should have shown him something much more satisfying than a ghost. A terrifying, twisted smile spread across Julian's face. He told the spirit that a mere reunion with the dead wasn't enough to make him happy. "You should have shown me the man who killed him," he whispered. "Show me his guts on my blade. That is what brings me joy." The wraith felt it then, a tide of something foul rising within Julian. A bloodlust so profound it would make even the damned scream in terror. It wasn't just anger, it was a craving for slaughter. Julian reached out, and the very energy of the wraith began to flow into his palm. He was condensing the spirit's essence into a single point of pure, dark power. The entity realized too late that Julian was the one in control. It was impossible. How could a living man harbor a darkness so absolute? The wraith watched, horrified, as the boy's killing intent was suddenly reined in. Some unknown force held back the tide of Julian's rage. In the background, the fading illusion of Lord Alaric finally answered that question about his name. The old knight confessed the truth. He had named his grandson Julian because even though he was born different, darker, he prayed for his light. He wanted the boy to have a heart of pure valor. Alaric had given him that name like a tether, hoping to keep his soul from drifting into the abyss. "Stay on the side of light," the spirit of his mentor whispered as he began to dissolve into mist, still wishing for Julian's salvation. As the vision of the righteous man vanished, the wraith's own mask shattered under the pressure of Julian's sheer, agonizing hatred. The spirit finally broke free and bolted. It was a desperate scramble for survival as Julian, scythe in hand, began the hunt. "I have to hide," the intruder shrieked mentally. It decided to dive deeper, seeking refuge in the darkest corners of its host's broken mind. Julian was right on its heels. The wraith thought that if it could just reach the boy's core consciousness, it might find a way to flip the script. It was already inside him, after all. But as it fled, the terrifying image of Julian with his scythe began to fade into the distance. Suddenly, green grass. Sunlight hit the wraith's cracked mask. It wasn't a nightmare anymore. It was a serene, beautiful meadow. A field of flowers stretched forever, centered around a single, massive door. The spirit was stunned to find such peace inside a monster like Julian. But that door was different. Intrigued, the spirit approached the mysterious portal standing tall in the middle of the green field. It was blood-red and sealed with an ancient charm. The wraith realized this was it, the vault where Julian's true self was locked away. Why would he lock it? The spirit didn't care. If it could just force that door open, it would own Julian's soul forever. Then the air turned cold. The peaceful field began to rot, leaving the parasitic spirit trembling with a new, sudden sense of dread. Black sludge erupted from the flowers. Before it could move, the shadow tendrils snaked up and pinned the wraith's feet to the ground. It was a reversal. The host wasn't being haunted, the host was hungry. Julian was literally devouring the intruder from the inside out. The spirit thrashed, but it was useless. Julian's shadow was swallowing it whole, bit by agonizing bit, until there was nowhere left to run. It was drowning in darkness. In a final, horrific moment, the vessel consumed the symbiote. The hunter had become the meal. Julian's eyes snapped open. Back in the real world, 𝒆'𝒔 recoiled as a gargantuan wave of malice erupted from the boy's body. Cedric watched in sheer disbelief. Julian reached up and tore the holy seal right off his own forehead, unleashing the storm within. Pure shadow spilled out. The boy was no longer human. He was a beacon of abyssal power. And then, a colossal shadow began to tower behind him. Julian glanced back at the nightmare he had summoned. A dark Templar, silent and terrifying, had manifested right there in the heart of the estate. Sir Alistair was second-guessing everything. He had always viewed Lord Alaric as this untouchable hero, but now, his loyalty was fraying at the seams. 19 years ago, their paths crossed when Alaric saved Alistair, then just a wandering sellsword from a brutal band of sea raiders. Ever since that day, he had served as the Lord's most devoted protector, the steadfast heart of the Ironwood Manor. But standing there now, Alistair was lost. He stared up at the gray sky, wondering how their noble house had fallen into such absolute chaos. He remembered Lady Beatrice's cold, calculating voice, asking if a commoner's son like Arthur should truly inherit the legendary Ironwood crest. Beatrice claimed it was all to protect the legacy. She ordered Alastair to clear the inner hall until her sorcerer found whatever he was seeking. Alastair had allowed the sorcerer entry, hoping it might save the house, but his gut was screaming that something was terribly wrong. He knew Malachar was a total fraud, a snake using dark tonics to hold Lord Alaric hostage under Lady Beatrice's thumb. Enough was enough. Beatrice's twisted plot broke every sacred oath Alastair had ever sworn to his lord, and he decided to act. He rushed to the Lord's chambers, but inside, Malachar realized he was in over his head. Young Arthur had summoned something truly ancient. This was no ordinary haunting. Arthur stood there, commanding a high-tier shadow wraith that radiated pure, unadulterated malice from the abyss. "Kill him," Arthur whispered. The wraith lunged, and Malachar, the self-proclaimed great sorcerer, began to absolutely lose his mind with fear. Desperate, the fraud threw up a holy ward to block the spirit's claws. He couldn't believe a mere boy could control an astral horror. It should have been impossible. You don't just tame a creature born of pure spite and shadow. It was supposed to be suicide. Malachar fought to hold his ground, but the darkness was overwhelming. The wraith shattered his puny defenses like they were made of glass. The old man scrambled back, gasping for air. That's when the wraith did something truly terrifying. It flashed a cold, jagged, malefic grin. Panicking, the sorcerer reached for a silver blade. He actually thought a piece of metal could stop a high-class demon from another realm. The wraith pounced. Suddenly, dozens of decaying, gray hands erupted from the spirit's mouth and torso, reaching out for its prey. The hands pinned Malachar to the floor. "Wait! Spare me!" he shrieked, begging for his life in exchange for his eternal loyalty. Arthur just stared him down. "Spare you? Not happening." Malachar sobbed, thinking this was just payback for his earlier parlor tricks and lies. But Arthur shook his head. "Oh, it's not just about the tricks, Malachar. There's a much bigger reason you have to go." The truth hit the sorcerer like a freight train. Arthur was silencing him because he knew too much about the Master's seal and the manual. As the wraith's grip tightened, the old man finally saw the full picture. He wasn't a player in this game, he was just a loose end. The wraith opened its maw wide. In his final, agonizing seconds, Malachar realized the boy had orchestrated his demise from the very start. Arthur called Julian inside. The squire stepped through the door and stopped dead. His jaw hit the floor at the sight of the room. Malachar, the powerful, terrifying sorcerer, was now nothing but a shriveled, rotting heap on the floor. It was a gruesome sight. "Is he dead?" Julian stammered. Arthur didn't even look up. "Pick up the body," he commanded, leaving the guard completely startled. Then Arthur grabbed a blade. He started hacking at the furniture, tearing the Lord's private chambers apart in a frenzied, calculated blur. "The sorcerer went mad," Arthur declared calmly. "In his insanity, he cut off my father's arm." Julian was left completely speechless. Julian asked if they were really going to lie. Arthur turned, eyes cold as ice. "Is there a problem with the plan, Julian?" Julian swallowed hard. The lie was solid, but Lady Beatrice? She was sharp. She'd see right through them and start asking questions. "She'll tear us apart, Arthur. We look way too suspicious standing here perfectly fine while the Lord has been maimed like this." "Even if Malachar really did go crazy," Julian argued, "Beatrice would never believe he could get past both of us without a fight." Arthur went silent, thinking. He needed a way to make the tragedy look real, a way to sell the blood and the chaos. Then he did the unthinkable. Arthur raised his sword and drove it straight into his own leg. "The madman attacked me too," he hissed. Julian's eyes nearly popped out of his head. This wasn't just a lie anymore. This was total, terrifying commitment to the deception. Arthur tossed the bloody sword aside and looked at his squire. "Tell me, is the story more believable for you now?" Julian was horrified. To stab yourself just to sell a lie, that isn't just determination, that is pure, cold-blooded madness in its finest form. "Let me help with the wound," Julian cried, but Arthur pushed him back. "No, I need to look pale for the act to work." "You're horrifying," Julian muttered. Just as he was realizing he'd hitched his wagon to a monster, the door creaked open. Sir Alistair burst in and froze. The room was a slaughterhouse. Blood, splintered wood, and the smell of death were everywhere. Alistair's heart sank. His lord lay there with a missing arm, and the sorcerer's corpse was already rotting before his eyes. Rage flared in Alistair's eyes. He turned on the two boys, immediately assuming that this absolute catastrophe was their fault. Suddenly, Arthur started to tremble. "Sir Alistair, please, help my father," he gasped. Then, right on cue, he collapsed onto the floor. Alistair rushed forward, his anger turning into pure confusion. "Why was the boy even in this room?" he demanded, scanning the carnage. Julian was having a tough time keeping a straight face. Gawain caught a glimpse of a smirk on the collapsed boy's face. Seeing that secret grin, the young squire was floored. The collapse, a total act, night fell over the estate of the Iron Blade. Inside the infirmary, rows of strange herbs filled the air. Countless drawers lined the walls of the grand apothecary. That medicinal scent actually calmed Julian's nerves. He focused, recalling the manual's instructions to find the hidden seal. Julian felt lucky. He had landed right in the middle of the treasure vault. He would wait for the dead of night to rob the Lord blind. The place was too busy now, though. So, the wounded, Julian waited with his loyal squire, Gawain. Julian complained that his squire was running late. Then, he reached into his robes as Gawain stepped forward. Gawain produced the two grimoires that belonged to the late scholar, 𝒆'𝒔, exactly what Julian had demanded. "Are these the ones?" The squire admitted it was nearly impossible to snatch them before the bonfire took them. Julian's interest was piqued. To scrub the crime scene, the guards had tossed all the old mystic's belongings into the flames. Julian sighed. Only the first volume of the Anomaly and the summary of the Star-Crossed School survived the inferno. Still, the young heir praised his squire for the solid work. Gawain just stared at him, confused. Gawain finally asked what was going on. Why was Julian so obsessed with these two forbidden shamanistic books? Julian just pointed toward the window. He asked the puzzled guard a simple question. "What do you see out there?" Gawain squinted into the darkness. Nothing. He saw absolutely nothing where the massive, spectral night was actually standing. Julian nodded. "Exactly. That is the problem I am trying to fix." Gawain was more lost than ever. Suddenly, boom, shouting erupted outside. A voice warned that the third-born was still recovering, but the visitor did not care. The door flew open. It was the lady of the manor herself. Lady Seraphina had arrived. Julian just stared blankly at the woman. Gawain, however, scrambled to drop into a deep, respectful bow. Julian finally put the pieces together. This angry woman was the first wife from the high noble house Sterling. Gawain had described her as a genius and a master swordswoman, the most dangerous player in the Sterling court. As Julian offered a cold greeting, he remembered the puppet master's warning. She was more dangerous than the eldest heir. The impostor apologized for staying seated, blaming his shattered leg. Gawain prayed Julian's acting would hold up. If Julian could just survive this interrogation, they might live. But Seraphina was not interested in pleasantries. Julian's blood ran cold when she said she was not there for a greeting. Without warning, Seraphina kicked his broken leg. Both Gawain and Julian were stunned by the sheer brutality. It was a sudden, vicious strike. Julian's scream echoed through the infirmary, but before Gawain could draw steel, a blade was at his own throat. Seraphina's personal assassin had Gawain pinned. Meanwhile, the lady stood over Julian, eyes narrowed. "So, you are hurt." The clever first wife was not fooled. She guessed Julian had stabbed himself just to make his lie look real. She admitted Julian's report to the Lord was convincing, but he had missed one crucial detail. A master of the arts like the late 𝒆'𝒔 does not just get possessed during a ritual. She laughed at his pathetic story. Julian had to sit there and take it as she mocked his shaman gone mad tale. Then Seraphina's temper exploded. She struck Julian across the face for thinking such a puny lie would work on her. The slap was massive. Julian tumbled right off the bed. Seraphina loomed over him, cold as ice. She had one question. What did he really find in the Lord's private chambers? Julian just sat on the floor, clutching his leg. Then the weirdest thing happened. Julian started to smile. A quiet giggle broke the silence. It turned into a full-blown, manic laugh. Seraphina stepped back, convinced the boy had finally lost his mind. The laughter stopped instantly. Julian, the butcher of the shadows, pointed a finger at her and summoned his phantom. Chaos, the spectral night phased right through Seraphina. She shivered, feeling a deathly chill sink into her bones. What just happened? As Seraphina panicked, the spirit grabbed her maid by the throat, hoisting her into the air. The paranormal sight reminded her of Silas's mangled corpse. Before she could blink, Julian vanished. He reappeared right behind her. He whispered in her ear, "You are looking for the secret manual and the Lord's seal, right?" While the phantom strangled the maid, Julian gave the lady a choice. Ultimatums were messy. Negotiation was better. Seraphina was paralyzed. This was not the weak boy she knew. Julian stood up, his injury seemingly forgotten. He looked her dead in the eye. "I do not want my father's throne, so let us talk business." Lady Margaret tried to keep her cool, but her heart skipped a beat. "That little monster." He actually said it. He knew the first son finally had a real rival for the throne. The succession for the Blackwood estate was no longer a sure thing. Arthur, the third son, stared at her with those chilling, predatory eyes that screamed one thing: madness. He dropped the bombshell. Because of the Duchess's greed, he wouldn't support the heir. Instead, he was handing the family's most precious relics to the second son, Julian. Margaret snapped, but Arthur wasn't done. He brought up Liam, the illegitimate son of a commoner, and praised him as the most promising knight in the entire kingdom. Pure, unadulterated rage. Arthur claimed that giving the forbidden codex to that low-born boy was the best way to end their little family war forever. Total dominance. Arthur made her realize he held every single card. In this Game of Thrones, Lady Margaret was suddenly just a pawn. "It's a bit chilly out tonight, isn't it?" He left her with that cold, mocking warning. A broken woman, told to watch her own shadow. Then a scream. A blood-curdling shriek echoed through the Rose Pavilion. Margaret hurled a heavy oak chair against the wall, shattering it into splinters. She wasn't finished. Out of pure frustration, she began brutally stomping the remains of the furniture into the floorboards. Her handmaid rushed in, desperate to calm the storm, but Margaret was exploding. How could this brat be so bold? How did he dare? "Calm down, I've never been more awake," she roared. Some simple boy had just stolen years of her meticulous, bloody hard work. Her personal night watched in a heavy silence. Margaret had assumed Arthur was just a fool she could scare into submission with a few threats. She acted recklessly, thinking he was a puppet. But this felt like a completely different person had taken over his body. Then it hit her, a chilling realization. Arthur hadn't changed. He'd been wearing a mask his entire life, concealing his true power. She remembered now. He was a brilliant child. But after his mother died, his family's influence withered, and he just faded away. It was all a lie, a survival tactic. He'd hidden his genius in the shadows just to stay alive in this den of vipers. Regret started to sink in, but her knight stepped forward, hand on her blade. "Let me kill the boy before he makes another move." Margaret stopped her. No, if the forbidden codex fell into the wrong hands during the chaos, the kingdom would burn. "Then what's the plan?" the knight asked. Margaret's eyes narrowed into slits. She wasn't about to bow to some demon child's will. She took a breath, her mind racing. "Send word to the Obsidian Circle," she commanded. "Inform them the High Seer is dead." The knight went pale at the name. The Obsidian Circle, that legendary, dark organization of shadow users. The late old man wasn't just a hermit. He was a key member of that dark coven. A wicked smile spread across Margaret's face. Arthur thought he'd won. Oh, he was in for a very nasty surprise. Midnight. In the quiet of the apothecary, Arthur turned the pages of a forbidden text. It spoke of the restless dead, spirits born of unfulfilled revenge. He was reading Master Vance's original, Codex of the Shadow Realm. According to the manuscript, a spirit's power is fueled by its lingering hate. Arthur held the book closer to the flickering candle flame. There are weak scarlet spirits bound to one spot, then ember spirits that can actually maim a host, and finally, the saffron type, lethal, pure killers. Suddenly, a shadow flickered. His pet spirit, that twisted ghost monk, slid back to his side. Arthur knew his ghost was definitely a lethal saffron class. "Did you find it?" he whispered. The monk nodded. The ghost pointed toward a hidden mechanism, camouflaged by weathered leaves and dust. The perfect scout for the secrets of the underground. But there was a catch. The monk had to avoid the Duchess's personal maid. Apparently, that woman was immune to his dark influence. Arthur didn't mind. His ghost's power worked perfectly on the common staff. He reached out and clicked a hidden latch in the drawer. Click, a secret passage groaned open from behind the desk. Arthur knew the Duchess was a first-rate warrior. If she was immune, her head guard certainly would be too. They were cut from the same lethal cloth. Arthur flipped through the shamanic book again. He needed something more, diabolical to handle them. There it was, the Emerald Wraith, a spirit so powerful it could warp reality itself and trap an entire army in a nightmare. These things were so dangerous they were usually eradicated on sight. But Arthur, he made up his mind right then and there. He stepped into the darkness. His target, the Duke's seal and the secret codex, hidden deep within the manor's bowels. He began the long descent. The stairs seemed to go on forever, spiraling deep into the cold earth. Was all this really just to hide a book and a piece of wax? Arthur smirked. It wouldn't hurt to own the most wanted items in the kingdom. Everyone wanted these treasures, but his ghost couldn't protect him from a real master. He had to find another way to fight. Finally, the stairs ended. He stepped out into a massive, yawning cavern that felt like the entrance to another world. 4 stone doors stood before him, exactly as the ghost described. The prize was waiting behind door number 4. He pushed the heavy stone open. "Time to dive deeper," he muttered, his voice echoing in the gloom. Was all this security really necessary? As Arthur stepped forward, he realized he was about to find out. A trap clicks. Suddenly, a massive boulder tethered by heavy chains drops right toward our hero's head. Narrowly dodging certain death, Arthur rolls away just as the stone crashes down. He definitely didn't expect this place to be a literal gauntlet of traps. In the darkness, 3 shimmering lights zip toward the imposter heir, leaving him momentarily baffled. Arrows, Arthur ducks and weaves, swinging his heavy lanterns to knock the incoming projectiles right out of the air. One bolt nearly pins his heart to the wall, glowing with a strange energy the moment it strikes the stone. With a final, casual flick of his wrist, he bats away the last arrow. Things are getting serious now. A massive wooden log swings across the corridor like a battering ram, making Arthur wonder if a simple manual is really worth all this security. He evades the timber, but a thought strikes him. What if there's something even bigger hidden down here? There's gotta be a legendary artifact nearby, he thinks, dodging a literal rain of flying blades as he pushes deeper into the cave. He's not even scared. He's actually excited to see what prize waits at the end of this deadly maze. Arthur sticks the landing, smooth as silk, not a single scratch on his body after surviving that absolute chaos. But then he stops dead. The cave opens into a perfectly symmetrical, handcrafted wooden hall that feels wrong. Scratched pillars, stacks of books, a lone candle, and a single plate. Someone has been living in this hole. Looking around the eerie chamber, he realizes this wasn't just a vault. It was someone's private training ground. Shaking off the chill, Arthur heads straight for the center of the room to claim exactly what he came for. There it is, a wooden chest holding the legendary Blackwood scrolls right in the middle of the floor. He pulls out 2 volumes, The Sylvan Sword Transformation and another titled The Will of Adamant. He remembers his contact, saying the family secrets were split, one for the blade and one for internal aura cultivation. The imposter pockets the loot, but something's bugging him. Why build this entire underground fortress just to guard 2 books? His eyes lock onto a massive, square stone block sitting awkwardly in the corner of the room. It looks totally useless and weighs a ton, but the scuff marks on the floor tell a different story. It's been moved recently. Arthur puts his back into it and shoves the stone aside, convinced there's a secret hidden under the secret. Jackpot, a hidden trapdoor. He pries it open without a second thought, his suspicions finally confirmed. Inside is a chest wrapped in warding seals that radiate a terrifying, dark energy. Even a seasoned rogue like him feels a chill. This thing is guarded way better than the family techniques, which only makes him more curious as he rips off the talismans. As the lid creaks open, the light from his lantern suddenly flickers and dies, plunging the room into absolute shadow. He doesn't even care about the light, because what he sees inside the box is absolutely breathtaking. It's just a book, an ordinary-looking volume bound in strange, pale leather. But then he touches it. It's warm like human flesh, and the smell, absolutely rancid and foul. A twisted, manic grin spreads across Arthur's face. The legendary flesh tome is finally in his hands. Meanwhile, back at Blackwood Manor, the drums are pounding for a massive celebration thrown by Lord Cedric, the second son. Cedric is living his best life, soaking in the music and the cheers of the crowd at the festival. He's beaming, thinking the whole hall looks brighter tonight. Talk about an ego trip for the ages. In his head, he's already convinced the title of Lord of the Manor is practically his for the taking. And he gives all the credit to his new friend, the treacherous mercenary knight, Sir Valerius. Valerius walks in with that creepy, plotting smirk and greets the second son like a loyal servant. Cedric apologizes for the modest feast, blaming his father's failing health for the lack of grandeur. He's laying it on thick, telling Valerius it's an honor to have him there as he invites him inside. The night drags on, and as the tired musicians pack up their gear, the real talk starts behind closed doors. Cedric is floored when he hears that his brother has lost all his combat skills, mostly because the real brother is a corpse. Valerius keeps the lie going, knowing that if anyone finds out he failed to protect the heir, his head is on the block. So the traitor plays both sides, keeping the impostor's secret to save his own skin while plotting his next move. He feeds Cedric exactly what he wants to hear, promising that the fake won't have the final word. He confirms the brother is currently powerless and can't use a lick of magic, all while picturing his eventual execution. Hearing that his rival is a helpless weakling, Cedric can barely contain his joy. The path to the throne is wide open. Lord Marcus sneered, calling his younger brother a total imbecile who'd clearly forfeited any right to the title or the position of High Master. He let out a cold laugh, thanking his new knight, Sir Cedric, for finally switching sides, while the veteran guard felt a chill run down his spine. The new master made it clear he didn't care about the dark secret behind the third son's sudden disability or why his sword hand had failed him. Marcus claimed he'd offer the guard total absolution regardless of the past, casually stating that every mistake is simply part of being human. But Cedric knew the truth. The second son would crush him the moment he learned the real story, so he kept his mouth shut. Offering a stiff apology, the guard insisted the truth had to stay buried in the shadows for now to protect them both. He promised his silence wouldn't bring harm, and since Marcus felt he had the upper hand, he chose to look the other way. Suddenly, Marcus dropped a bombshell, calling the man a former assassin from the notorious Imperial Shadow Guard. Cedric was paralyzed. The young lord he'd always dismissed as a clever child was now staring him down with a terrifyingly smug grin. Marcus leaned in close, whispering if that little detail was supposed to be a secret, making Cedric realize his entire past had been hunted down. As he tried to deny it, the former killer realized he'd been far too reckless with his new, calculating master. Satisfied with the fear he'd instilled, Marcus dismissed his new puppet, telling him he'd be summoned when the time was right. As Cedric retreated from the manor, Marcus watched from the shadows of his window, his mind already spinning with new schemes. He was convinced the traitorous little brother was hiding something big, something that meant Julian actually had a plan. 𝒄𝒊𝒆, an elite fighter nearing the peak of his power, was given a dark mission: uncover Julian's secret and prove his weakness once and for all. The henchman looked to his master, asking if this was a simple scouting mission or something more permanent. Marcus's answer was simple: get rough. 𝒄𝒊𝒆 grinned, more than happy to follow an order that involved a little blood. Meanwhile, deep within the sunken crypt, Julian could actually feel a rhythmic thumping coming from a forbidden book bound in human skin. Even though it had a pulse, the young man felt a sickening aura. Whatever lay between those pages was rotting and closer to the grave than to life. Our protagonist was stunned, wondering why such a foul, demonic artifact was hidden within the holy temple grounds. Curiosity took over, and just as he reached out to crack open the evil tome, a suffocating darkness flooded the entire chamber. The spectral monk had returned. Julian demanded to know why he was back, but the spirit's reaction was completely unexpected. The terrifying astral entity dropped to its knees, bowing in total submission and absolute fear. Julian couldn't believe it. This legendary monk was acting like a terrified servant, proving just how dangerous that book truly was. He quickly shoved the cursed object back into its box, realizing that if the monk was here, an intruder was definitely closing in. Looking up, Julian's eyes sharpened. Someone had breached the perimeter, and they were closer than he thought. He went dead silent, focusing every sense on the shadows to track the uninvited guest. Back at the estate, a beautiful full moon hung over the gardens as 𝒄𝒊𝒆 leaped silently across the slate rooftops. But as he reached the tree line, he stopped cold, spotting the guard Cedric standing watch in the middle of the night. The spy was baffled. Why was the manor's best blade standing out here instead of guarding the injured little lord inside? 𝒄𝒊𝒆 slipped between the eaves, more certain than ever that these people were covering up something massive. He reached Julian's chambers and peeked through the glass, only to see the boy tucked away, seemingly lost in a peaceful slumber. Slipping inside, 𝒄𝒊𝒆 cursed under his breath, wondering why Cedric was playing sentry for a kid who was just taking a nap. He moved to check Julian's internal mana flow, but his eyes caught something else sitting right there on a small side table. It was one of the Duke's most guarded forbidden texts, just sitting out in the open like a common novel. 𝒄𝒊𝒆 flipped through the pages, his heart racing as he realized this single book was the key to winning the entire succession war. He chuckled to himself, thinking they'd finally won, completely unaware that Julian was standing directly behind him. Before the spy could even blink, Julian lunged out of the darkness and grabbed him by the back of the neck. With a sickening crack, Julian slammed the man's face into the heavy tea table, the peaceful sleeper now looking like a total predator. The young lord asked the spy what he was doing in his room, showing zero mercy as he repeatedly bashed his head against the wood. Julian whispered that he was just putting him to sleep because he's such a kind-hearted man, his voice dripping with madness. As his skull rattled against the table again and again, the spy's only thought was that this boy was a complete psychopath. After a brutal massage session, 𝒄𝒊𝒆 finally woke up to find the world turned upside down. He was dangling by his feet from the ceiling, staring at a very happy Julian who was thrilled his guest was finally awake. The spy tried to process his nightmare, but Julian didn't give him a second. He just drew a jagged knife and slammed it into the floor. Look at that face. Lord Arthur has that "I'm about to do something terrible" expression as he prepares for a heart-to-heart with the captured rat. But before we get to the fun part, let's rewind. Arthur had just finished absolutely demolishing the spy, 𝒄𝒊𝒆, leaving him a bloody mess on the stone floor. Right on cue, Sir Alistair arrives. Arthur takes one look at his knight's pale face and asks, "So, friend of yours?" Alistair doesn't miss a beat. He explains that this man is a personal shadow for Lord Julian, the second prince of the kingdom. Arthur is genuinely baffled. Why the hell is his brother's favorite lapdog snooping around his private estate? Alistair figures since the guy was wearing a mask, he was definitely there for some light espionage. Arthur just shrugs, throws the body over his shoulder, and says he's going to make him talk. Alistair practically chokes. Whoa, wait, my lord, you can't just interrogate him like that. It's better to just let him go. He's terrified because everyone knows Julian is obsessively protective of his men. Cross one member of House Julian, and you've crossed them all. Arthur's response, a cold, I'll think about it. Yeah, right, he's already walking away with the unconscious spy in tow. Alistair keeps trying to play the voice of reason, but Arthur isn't listening to a single word. He's on a mission. The knight eventually just sighs and looks at the sky. He's done. At this point, he's just praying Arthur doesn't actually end the guy. See, Arthur is smart, scary smart, but he's also a total wildcard who might do anything. And that's exactly what Alistair realizes. The more he thinks about it, the more he knows Silas is likely a dead man walking. Fast forward to the present. Silas is hanging upside down like a side of beef, begging to be let down. Arthur just tilts his head. And why exactly should I untie an enemy like you? Silas tries to act tough. Look, Julian sent me. If you keep this up, you won't survive the week. Just hand over the forbidden scroll and maybe we'll call it even. The audacity. Even while dangling, he's trying to boss Arthur around. Don't make this more irritating for yourself, he snarls. Arthur actually lets out a dark laugh. You know, this is hilarious. He realizes Julian has coddled his subordinates so much that they actually think they have the upper hand while being captured. Arthur walks over and says, Fine, let's get you down. Silas smirks, thinking his threats actually worked. Smart move, Silas grunts as Arthur approaches. I'll tell the prince to go easy on you for this. But then, something vanishes, specifically one of Silas's fingers. Arthur is holding the bloody digit with a look of pure psychopathic glee. Recognize this. Silas is losing his mind. His finger is gone, but he didn't feel a thing. No pain, no sensation, nothing. He can't move. He can't even sense his own mana. He's completely paralyzed and has no idea what Arthur is thinking. Arthur explains the science behind the horror. He brewed a little paralyzing cocktail from the alchemist's ward. From the neck down, Silas is basically a vegetable for the next few hours. He won't feel a thing. Arthur pulls out a knife. Here's the deal. For every second you don't answer me, another finger goes bye-bye. First question. What was the real reason my brother sent a rat like you into my home? With a terrifying glare, he demands the truth. Silas hesitates. Bad move. Arthur gently disconnects finger number 2. The spy still isn't talking, so Arthur just keeps the count going, already reaching number 2. By the third time, Silas is screaming his lungs out in pure psychological terror. He's begging, pleading, crying for Arthur to stop, but our protagonist is already reaching for number 4. Silas finally breaks. He can't take it. The silence, the lack of feeling, it's driving him insane and he can't bear it. Stop, please, Arthur pauses. Good, the next one was going to be your thumb anyway. Seeing his hand is basically a stump, the spy finally decides to open his mouth and spill his guts. Apparently, Lord Julian sent him there personally. He wanted to confirm if the third son had actually lost his martial prowess. Silas is hyperventilating now, completely broken by the stress of the situation. Arthur goes quiet, it all clicks. The talk of his lost power. The guard really did switch sides. Time for the follow-up. Arthur's no fool. It was Captain Sterling who told him, wasn't it? Desperate to keep his remaining fingers, Silas frantically answers yes. Arthur just smiles. Sterling, you clever bastard. Silas can't believe it. Arthur figured out the betrayal in seconds, and that realization is almost as scary as the knife. Arthur stands up, his interrogation complete. Well, I'm out of questions. He looks down at the shivering wreck on the floor, wondering exactly what to do with this piece of flesh. Under that crushing pressure, Cedric knew he was done for. Desperate to live, he tries a last-ditch plea to Alaric. He swears his undying loyalty, acting shocked that the young lord of House Sterling was actually this brilliant. The spy continues his act, promising he would even lay down his life for the young master's future. Our boy Alaric just smiles. Fine, he says, there is one thing you can do to prove it. Then the young lord asks if he is willing to make a final request to the high heavens. Cedric thinks he is home free. He shouts that he will follow any command his new master gives. Then zero mercy. Alaric's blade flashes, buried deep in a vital spot as the spy's lifeblood begins to spray. As Cedric groans in agony, Alaric just grins. "You said you would risk your life, right? I just need the blood." Completely cold-blooded. He ends the traitor's life right then and there without a single shred of regret. Cedric's final thought before the darkness. I didn't think he meant literally. Absolute irony. Alaric grabs that forbidden tome again. He knew he couldn't break the holy chains by brute force alone. That is the secret from the ancient Arcanum records. A holy seal is pure, so it needs filth to break. To weaken its divine power, you have to drench it in something truly corrupted, like a traitor's blood. He pours the poor guy's remains over the book. Brutal, sure, but for Alaric, it is just a means to an end. And just like that, the ritual is complete. Our protagonist stands back, waiting for the horror to unfold. The enchanted chains binding the book begin to crack. One by one, they shatter into 1,000 pieces. Alaric watches, wondering what kind of monster is about to crawl out, when suddenly the blood starts floating. Gravity goes out the window as that red liquid swirls around the room, staining everything in its path. It is pure chaos. Alaric stands in the middle of the storm, trying to process the power he just unleashed. The crimson mist begins to coalesce. Finally, he realizes he has messed with something way beyond his control. A humanoid shape rises from the puddle. Something truly nightmare-inducing is taking form within that pool of red. She appears right in front of Alaric. Our boy is actually stunned. This isn't what he expected at all. Droplets of gore fall as he stares in shock at the terrifying beauty manifesting before his very eyes. The curse has birthed a woman. She creates a domain of pure blood where nothing else exists. This mysterious entity starts walking toward him. Alaric is frozen to the spot as she approaches. But get this, she is gorgeous. She looks more like a fallen goddess than a malevolent, hungry spirit. Don't let the looks fool you. Our hero senses her power. She is leagues beyond any lesser wraith. This is a level 5 phantom, a legendary blue spirit mentioned in the ancient texts of the Order. To be honest, he was expecting a basic demon, but this is something ancient and primal. Suddenly, the crimson tides rise up to trap him. It is like the room itself is trying to swallow him. The spirit finally speaks. "Foolish mortal," she says, her voice sounding like a chorus of the dead. She pulls a pin from her hair and demands he surrender his soul to her right this second. Alaric remembers the lore. Blue spirits are abominations that have haunted the kingdom for centuries. They can twist reality itself, causing madness and suffering to anyone unlucky enough to cross their path. She casually starts smoking her pipe, watching him struggle. "You are a bit slow, aren't you?" she mocks. Alaric grinds his teeth, realizing the book didn't lie. These spirits are dangerous as hell. But here is the thing, he actually finds this fun. The ancient being is visibly confused by his smirk. Still fighting the bindings, the young lord laughs. Every ghost wants the same thing, don't they? A body. You are all just desperate for a vessel to walk the earth again, aren't you? He mocks her power, betting she can't do a thing without his flesh. Now she is actually intrigued. Alaric rips himself free from the blood prison. "If you want my body so bad, come and take it." Bad move. Without even blinking, she lashes out with the red liquid beneath his feet. A spike of blood lances through him before he can even react. It is too fast, way too fast. Part of his stomach is just gone. Alaric collapses to the floor, gasping as his life fades. "Stupid human," she scoffs, looking down at his broken form while preparing her final, lethal strike. The Countess sneers, claiming Merrick is forcing her hand once again. With a wave of her hand, she commands the swirling pool of crimson liquid, launching a lethal strike. This time, the boiling blood sears through Merrick's skin. The pain is blinding, leaving him frozen in terror, while the woman just watches with a cruel, satisfied grin. She asks if he finally understands his place. There's no escape. One last time, she demands Merrick be a good little knight and hand over his body for her to possess. But before he can collapse into the abyss, Merrick does the impossible. He forces himself upright. The spirit's eyes widen. She didn't expect this much fight from a dying man. Even with his body broken and bleeding, Merrick refuses to stay down. The Countess is stunned. How is this human still breathing, let alone standing on his own 2 feet? She can't wrap her head around it. He's enduring the agony of a ruined face and shattered bones without blinking. Right then, she realizes, this boy is no ordinary peasant. The blood beneath Merrick's boots suddenly surges, coiling around his ankles like iron chains. With a flick of her wrist, the azure spirit hurls him across the room into a stone pillar. Slam, Merrick hits the floor, barely conscious. The Countess makes him an offer. Surrender your soul to me, and I'll grant you any wish your heart desires. Broken and backed into a corner, Merrick coughs up blood. He looks her in the eye and asks why a powerful spirit like her would even bother offering him a deal. She glides toward him, her voice like silk and ice. She claims she's being kind, but the truth is simple. She needs his physical shell to be intact for her own survival. Merrick isn't buying the act. He grits his teeth and asks the one question that matters. What happens if he looks her in the eye and says no? Her face twists into a demonic mask of pure hatred. Then I'll slaughter you where you lie, she hisses, and find a more obedient puppet to take your place. He asks again, does he really get a wish? The spirit nods, sensing victory. She sees the fire in his eyes and assumes he's finally ready to trade his soul for power. She comments that he must have endured a hellish life to be this desperate. She even promises to hunt down whoever wronged him and tear them apart in his name. Finally, she tells him to speak his wish, but Merrick just laughs in her face. His wish? For her to shut her damn mouth and become his bound familiar. The air turns freezing. Enraged, the Countess conjures a massive whirlwind of blood that fills the entire hall. The catch-up time is over. She's going for the kill. You chose this agony, she screams. She decides right then that if he won't be her vessel, he'll be a stain on the floor. Merrick is about to get exactly what he deserves. She pours every ounce of her ancient power into the attack, calling him a foolish, arrogant mortal. The accumulated blood in the chamber roars toward Merrick like a tidal wave. Merrick can only stand there and watch as the crimson tide swallows him whole. He's pinned, unable to move as the liquid fills his lungs and drags him under. The force of the blows is relentless. Merrick begins to drift away, his consciousness fading as the darkness of the blood sea takes hold of him. The Countess watches him drown, declaring that she will carve his very name out of his bones and rip every limb from his useless body. It's a waste of a good vessel, she muses, but necessary to break his spirit. Amidst that suffocating ocean of red, our hero seems completely unable to fight back. But inside that liquid nightmare, Merrick notices something. A taste. It's thick and bitter like rusted iron, far heavier and more metallic than any cherry. His senses are screaming at him, this is blood. But as he drifts, he realizes it feels wrong. It's cold. It lacks the spark of a living thing. He thinks back to the horrors he's committed in his past life. He remembers the taste of the blood he once spilled, and how different it felt from this. Real blood has a pulse. It has warmth, vitality, and the literal vibration of life itself. That is what it means to be alive. But this tastes only of death. Suddenly, Merrick's eyes snap open. Something inside him clicks. In the middle of that swirling carnage, he finds his focus and refuses to let go. The azure spirit nearly chokes on her own breath. She's in complete shock. She can't understand how a mere human is regaining consciousness inside her ultimate spell. Merrick realizes the truth. None of this is real. It's a mind game. He strikes out, and the very fabric of the nightmare begins to crack like a shattered mirror. Reality snaps back. They're back in the stone chamber where it all started. The Countess is thrown against the wall, gasping for air as the illusion dissolves. A terrifying, dark aura begins to pour out of Merrick's body. He stands in the center of the room, perfectly still, looking like a god of death reborn. The spirit is spiraling into a panic. Merrick is completely unharmed, not a single scratch. To her, this situation isn't just bad, it's physically impossible. Desperate to end him, she conjures a blood-red butterfly on her fingertip. It looks delicate, but it's packed with enough cursed energy to level a house. She sends the insect fluttering toward Merrick. It glides through the air, silent and deadly, striking him right in the chest. But Merrick doesn't even flinch. The Countess realizes the horrific truth. This is transcendence. He didn't just survive the illusion, he completely detached himself from his own 5 senses to escape it. Transcendence is the ultimate mental fortress. By shutting out the world, he made her magic completely useless. But even knowing that, she can't believe he pulled it off. For a master sorcerer, this is a legendary feat. For a boy who isn't even a ranked squire yet, it's unheard of. It shouldn't be happening. She wonders if she's looking at a natural-born monster, a genius of the dark arts. Meanwhile, Merrick starts laughing, a wild, euphoric sound that echoes off the walls. The spirit is losing her mind. She screams at him, asking how he can possibly be laughing when he's still trapped in this room with a vengeful demon. Merrick stops and looks at her with a twisted grin. He tells her he just had a funny idea, a thought so hilarious he couldn't keep it in. The Countess feels a cold shiver run down her spine. She looks at his hands and finally sees it, the ancient grimoire he used to summon her in the first place. Merrick holds the book tight. He remembers the notes from Archmage Thorn, the secret lore of the Order of the Sun and Moon that everyone else forgot. The older and more powerful a spirit is, the more they rely on a physical anchor to stay in this realm. They need a bridge to cross over. That bridge is the book. The grimoire isn't just a tool, it's her actual heart. If the book breaks, she breaks right along with it. Like a total lunatic, Merrick leans down and sinks his teeth into the leather cover, tearing the parchment apart. The Countess screams in agony as her very soul begins to rip in two. The Banshee lets out a bone-chilling shriek as her power completely unravels, her aura flickering like a dying flame. In that moment, Arthur knew his gamble had actually paid off. "You cursed wretch," she howls, trembling with pure rage. She couldn't fathom how a mere mortal could even scratch a relic infused with such foul, ancient sorcery. She lunges at him, claws bared, her mind racing. Even the High Inquisitors of the First Circle failed to seal this grimoire after dozens of attempts to burn it to ashes. And yet this boy, he didn't hesitate for a single second. He succeeded where the most powerful mages in the kingdom had failed. In a flash, the spirit is on him, her hands locked around Arthur's throat. She's choking the life out of him, screaming, "Is this just another one of your pathetic illusions?" She's done playing games. She doesn't need his body anymore. She just wants him dead. To her, his death is the price for spitting on her mercy. Arthur just stares back at her, his eyes cold. He knew something was wrong. If she really wanted that book, she would have taken it from him ages ago. But he'd already connected the dots. The truth, this terrifying creature couldn't even lay a finger on the object itself without being repelled. Then he does the unthinkable. He swallows the fragment of the leather book cover he'd ripped away with his teeth moments before. The woman loses it, pure, unadulterated panic. She starts pummeling him, shrieking for the boy to spit it out before the contract is sealed. He's gagging, the jagged leather tearing at his throat as he forced it down. The demonic blood he'd absorbed earlier is already burning through his veins like liquid fire. Every bone in his body feels like it's snapping. It's the exact same agonizing sensation as the first time he'd consumed a toxic mark just to survive the slums. But beneath the physical agony, he feels something else. A blinding, ancient fury directed at a power far greater than his own, and a desperate, starving thirst for revenge. With one final gulp, Arthur swallows. And just like that, the floodgates of the spirit's soul burst wide open, drowning him in her past. "You absolute fool," she screams, her voice cracking. Her grip tightens until Arthur's vision blurs and warm blood starts splattering from his lips. One look, that was all it took for them both to realize the world was changing. Suddenly, everything vanishes, replaced by a horizon of deep, bloody crimson. Arthur finds himself standing in a literal nightmare. A sky of fire, a burning citadel in the distance, and he's standing right in the middle of a sea of corpses. Bodies for as far as the eye can see. And there, rising out of the carnage, sits a dark altar with a figure draped in shadow. Kneeling before the throne is a blonde woman, the spirit's true form from centuries ago. Arthur is watching a memory of the day her world ended. She was a knight then. He watches as she desperately wraps torn strips of her tunic around her sword hilt, her hands shaking but her resolve like iron. She raises her blade, pointing it directly at the monster on the throne, her voice trembling as she spits out a final, defiant oath. Arthur can't hear the words, but the emotion. It hits him like a physical blow. It's pure, undiluted hatred that transcends time itself. She's weeping, not from fear, but from loathing. The figure before her has ivory hair and wicked, jagged horns, a true devil of the old world. The white-haired monster doesn't even move. He just gives a slight, mocking smile, the look of a god amused by a bothersome insect. With a roar of grief, the warrior charges. She puts every ounce of her soul into one final strike to end the devil's life once and for all. It's over in a heartbeat. He stops her cold, his hand plunging into her chest as easily as a hot knife through wax. She can only watch, paralyzed, as he rips the beating heart right out of her body. With a sickening crunch, he crushes it, and her life fades to gray. As she collapses, a circle of elite royal guards in obsidian armor closes in. They aren't there to help, they're there to finish the slaughter. They don't offer a quick death. They draw their daggers, eyes cold and hollow, stepping toward the dying woman for one last act of cruelty. It's a massacre, a flurry of blades. When the dust finally settles, the only thing left of that proud warrior are broken remnants in the dirt. And from that horrific sacrifice, the grimoire was born, the very book that Arthur had just used to bind her soul to his own. Arthur bolts upright with a scream, gasping for air. He's back in reality, but his heart is pounding against a strange, glowing red thread on his chest. The spirit stumbles back, her elegant hat falling into the dust as she becomes frantic. She feels it, the invisible chain tightening around her very essence. She's a familiar now, bound to a mortal. Arthur, on the other hand, can't help but smirk. He just gained the most dangerous weapon in the kingdom. She realizes what's happened and snaps. She grabs Arthur by the throat and slams him violently against a stone pillar, the rock shattering behind him. But then she freezes, gasping in agony. Every bit of pain she inflicts on Arthur is reflected right back onto her own soul. Arthur shoves her off, his own temper flaring. He realizes the deal. A familiar feels the exact same pain their master does, no exceptions. He scans the ruins, wondering where his companion, the demon monk, went. The man had basically walked back from the gates of hell earlier. He spots the monk standing with their friend nearby. Both of them look absolutely crushed, their faces pale as if they've just witnessed a tragedy. Arthur turns back to the blonde specter. "Looks like we're stuck together from now on," he says. "So, are you going to introduce yourself?" He extends a hand, trying to play the part of a proper master. "I'm Arthur, and you are, what am I supposed to call you?" Silence, just a look of pure loathing. Arthur shrugs. If she won't give him a name, he'll just have to make one up himself. "Fine, I'll call you Red Dunbeal," he mocks. The woman's face turns a shade of crimson that could rival the fires of hell. Arthur just laughs, seeing this ancient, terrifying entity fuming over a silly nickname. It's the most satisfying thing he's seen all day. He tries one more time, leaning in with a grin. "Look, if you hate the nickname that much, just tell me your real name. It's that simple." She refuses to give up her name, so Arthur just shrugs. Fine then, if she won't talk, he'll just have to call her whatever he wants. Since she's a glowing blue apparition, he decides to call her Lady Azure, just like the old legends, and she doesn't actually seem that annoyed. After he says it, she just turns her back on him. Typical. Arthur realizes right then that she has a massive ego and won't be easy. He couldn't just beat her into submission or anything like that. No chance. So our hero decides on a different play. He's going to win her over slowly. He shifts gears, turning his focus toward that terrifying book bound in human skin. Time to see what's really hidden inside those cursed pages. He calls her by the new nickname and asks if she knows the book's secrets, but she just snaps back that she doesn't know any Lady 𝒔. Total cold shoulder. She basically tells him she knows nothing and that he should stop bothering her with his questions immediately. Arthur starts reading and, holy hell, the entire thing is written in actual blood. It's gruesome, but honestly, he's pretty impressed by the craft. There's just one problem. The characters are a total mess. They don't seem to fit together at all. What is he even looking at? For some reason, Lady 𝒔 just watches him struggle and starts laughing. Great. Arthur realizes she isn't helping anytime soon. He's going to crack this alone. No choice but to dive in. He starts piecing the letters together, one by one, trying to make sense of the madness on the page. He begins to chant the text aloud, whispering that one must trust the mind even when faced with total despair. Deep stuff, right? He keeps reciting these weird, nonsensical words. Suddenly, the spirit's face pales. She looks absolutely terrified of what he's accidentally unleashing. Arthur was unknowingly performing a ritual, and it was already hitting her. Thick, purple energy starts swirling violently around his body. The energy is wild. Lady 𝒔 is shaking now, completely spooked by the raw power spiraling around our protagonist. He doesn't stop. He keeps the chant going until, boom, the first stage of the ritual is finally complete. And then things get weird. His hand literally fuses into that creepy book. The spirit screams out that this should be absolutely impossible. She's losing it, demanding to know how a mere boy pulled this off. Arthur, he's just confused. Is she worried about the book being stuck? He asks if she's talking about the tome being glued to his skin, but then, he feels a sudden, sharp surge deep within his gut. Because they're linked, she feels the surge too. Panicked, she screams at him to stop breathing immediately. Arthur listens. He holds his breath and clears his head, entering a state that's almost like being dead. Just pure silence. It works. The book peels away from his hand and hits the floor with a heavy thud. Crisis averted. He finished the ritual in the blink of an eye. The woman is floored. She can't believe how fast he pulled that off. He actually broke the binding ritual himself. How is that possible for a kid who hasn't even touched a sword or learned magic? She realizes this wasn't just some lucky break or a miracle. He actually performed the soul-binding ritual with terrifying precision. She stares at him, frozen. In all her past lives, she's never seen anything quite like this boy before. Arthur collapses, gasping for air. He feels like he was about to suffocate right there on the cold stone floor. Lady 𝒔 explains that he almost died because his breathing was completely out of sync with the ritual's flow. Amateur mistake. Wait, Arthur realizes his little plan actually worked. She's finally giving him answers. He asks if she's really helping him now. She snaps back, looking totally annoyed. She only helped so his idiocy wouldn't end up hurting her too. Taking the lead, Arthur asks what this soul-binding thing actually is. He needs to know the catch. She tells him it's exactly what it sounds like. It tethers things to your soul. Then, she points to a nearby corpse for a test. He looks over and sees 𝒔, the spy his brother sent to keep tabs on him, cold as ice. She tells him to focus on the core of the man's energy, though 𝒔's mana is probably fading fast since he's dead. She sighs, asking if she really has to explain every little detail. Arthur just rubs his neck, admitting he knows nothing. They get into position. She instructs him to repeat the chant, focusing all his will on the task at hand. He starts the ritual again, but this time, he actually feels it. He knows exactly what's about to go down. As he finishes, that eerie purple glow erupts from 𝒔's lifeless body. It's happening. The energy surges into Arthur, surprising him. He can feel this incredible warmth racing through his veins and straight into his palms. It circles his inner core. The spirit tells him to bind everything, even the raw mana itself, to make it stay. She asks if he can finally feel it. This is the true power of the soul binding, taking what isn't yours. He feels the power wrapping around his chest. It clicks. This is the fabled ether that Lord Cedric always mentioned. Arthur remembers being told that gathering ether takes years of hard work. But this ability, It lets him steal it instantly. In other words, our boy just found a shortcut to becoming the strongest knight in the kingdom in record time. Arthur tries to touch the energy, but then the spirit sighs, explaining that 𝒃 doesn't just stay put. It takes a very specific, refined technique to actually hold it. Without that method, our hero won't be able to condense the energy into his mana core. It'll just slip away. Basically, using a binding ritual to collect power is a dead end. Alistair's face falls. Talk about a buzzkill. He really thought he'd found a cheat code. The woman scoffed, asking if he truly thought becoming a master knight was that simple. Still, she tells him not to pout. The binding ritual isn't useless. It's actually got plenty of other applications. See, this ritual is just the first of the 8 breaking arts. It's the absolute baseline, but even this opens a world of possibilities. She explains that while the 𝒃 might disperse, it's still pure power. That part never changes. Then she challenges Alistair to concentrate the energy in his palm. But the boy, he's got no clue where to start. Just visualize it, she says. The movements and the incantations. They're just tools to help focus your mind. If he can hold that image perfectly, the 𝒃 should flow exactly where he wants it, straight to his hand. The spirit secretly laughs. No way. A total beginner doing that on the first try, it's literally impossible. But then Alistair starts the ritual. Suddenly, a strange, glowing energy begins swirling right in the center of his palm. He actually does it, gripping the concentrated power in his fist. The woman stands there, completely speechless. Alistair doesn't hesitate. He punches a stone pillar, the energy piercing through the solid rock like it's nothing. The pillar snaps in two. The spirit is reeling. How could a complete novice pull off a feat like that? Alistair just shrugs it off like it was easy, while the woman stares, wondering who this kid really is. In her head, she's reeling. She's seen plenty of geniuses in her time, but Alistair, he's on a different level. Never met anyone like him. Feeling his new strength, the boy mutters that he finally gets why people love the blade. Makes killing a lot easier, he says. The woman realizes he's already grasped the darkest truth of combat. Forget all that training the soul nonsense. At the end of the day, it's about how quickly you can end a life. Brazen as ever, he asks for the next technique in the book. She starts to explain, but then catches herself. She realizes his game. She almost fell for it. Irritated, she snaps that she's done playing his teacher for today. Nearly got played by a mere mortal, she mutters, vowing not to show off any more cool tricks for him. She'd already said way more than she should have. The boy was like a sponge, soaking up every word. She shuts him down, telling him to stop talking. Alistair's annoyed. He still had a ton of questions. While trying to steady his power, he realizes she might not be helping him again anytime soon. Such a shame. He looks at his hand. The spirit said the 𝒃 would scatter, yet he still feels a chilling energy lingering there. He glances at the spirit, debating whether to ask her, but then shakes his head. She definitely won't give him an answer. No point in begging. He decides to drop it, figuring it's more fun to figure things out on his own anyway. He tells the spirit to keep up. Meanwhile, in the dead of night, a mysterious figure moves through the shadows. Under the cold moonlight, we see an elite guard, Lady Seraphina's personal escort, arriving at the Sanctuary of Embers. She enters the ancient temple, the heavy doors creaking open to reveal a hall filled with strange, unsettling sculptures. Statues and bizarre artifacts line the walls. She stops before a massive stone figure that seems to be watching her. The aura is heavy, suffocating. The guard wonders why this place is filled with such creepy, forbidden relics. Suddenly, a torch ignites on its own. She speaks to the darkness, knowing she's being heard by the unseen masters. She delivers the grim news. Bishop Silas is dead, and the one who did it. Lord Alistair, the third son of the noble house. The statue remains silent as she lays down 300 silver coins. She offers an apology from Lady Seraphina, along with a promise of 400 more if they take a new contract. The mission is simple: eliminate the third young master. A heavy silence falls over the entire room. Suddenly, the flame goes out. The deal is struck. The message has been received loud and clear. The girl bows and bolts for the exit, not wanting to spend another second near that terrifying statue. There was definitely nobody there, so why did it feel like 1,000 eyes were tracking her every move? Back inside, Silas's body lies cold. Strange voices whisper in the dark, confirming that this was no accident. It was a calculated murder. They'd heard reports of a maid levitating, the unmistakable sign of a spirit's influence. They're certain now the third son is the one behind it all, and now the hunt is on. Somewhere in the shadows, a secret meeting of powerful figures has just begun to discuss a terrifying possibility: spirit possession. One member suggests Arthur might be bound to a legendary golden spirit, but the others laugh it off. You can't turn a vengeful ghost into a loyal familiar. The cult leader shuts down the debate with a cold command. One of his shadows will execute the third son of the Sterling Blade Manor and set that restless spirit free. Without a second thought, the hooded figures agree. The hit is on. Back at Arthur's estate, the sun is just starting to peek over the horizon, and poor Cedric is absolutely wiped out. He's thinking Arthur is a total nightmare for keeping him up all night, but the work isn't done yet. The young master still has chores for him. Cedric drags himself into the room with a lit brazier, and Arthur actually thanks him right away, which is a bit suspicious. When Cedric asks what the fire is for, Arthur drops a bombshell. He's got some trash that needs burning. And then, absolute madness. Arthur starts ripping apart the ancient grimoire of the Sterling family, and Cedric looks like he's about to have a heart attack. Cedric is in total shock, watching a literal fortune being torn to shreds, shouting, "Why? What are you doing?" Arthur just calmly tosses the scraps into the flames, while Cedric loses his mind, screaming that this crazy bastard just burned a 1,000-year-old legacy. Finally, the last page turns to ash, and the room goes dead silent. Heartbroken and hollow, Cedric asks why he'd destroy something every knight in the kingdom would kill to possess. These manuals are the ultimate power, the foundation of their entire house. Arthur just shrugs and says, "That's exactly why I burned them," before chucking the last empty cover right at Cedric's face. Here's the kicker. Arthur explains that by burning the books, he's now the only person alive who holds that power, and Cedric is just left standing there, baffled. "It's all up here anyway," Arthur says, tapping his head before turning his back to give one last order. He tells Cedric that at the break of dawn, he needs to deliver a special gift to Lady Beatrice and his older brother, Julian. Cedric is confused, but Arthur reminds him of the truth. Everyone is greedy for those secrets. Then, with a chilling smile, Arthur mentions he just wants a peaceful family, as if sharing these secrets would actually bring them together. Seeing that terrifying look on his master's face, Cedric finally gets it. This isn't a gift, it's a trap. The clock hits 6 in the morning, and the world is finally waking up. Meanwhile, Silas is finishing his morning routine, thinking about how efficient he is. Bed made, clothes changed, ready for the day. It's a habit from his days as a cold-blooded assassin. Total control, zero mistakes. But he thinks he can finally relax soon, because his big break is right around the corner. Once he secures his spot as Lord Julian's right-hand man, he'll be an elder of the clan, a man of real status and power. He looks at the horizon, feeling all nostalgic about going from a starving orphan to a high-ranking noble. But Silas's little trip down memory lane is cut short when a messenger bursts in. Apparently, Lord Julian is calling for him right now, and Silas feels a sudden pit in his stomach. Something is wrong. Skip ahead a few hours, and boom, a door flies open as Silas storms out, absolutely fuming. He's clutching his head, blood dripping down his face like he's been cracked open with something heavy. We flash back to a few minutes earlier. Silas is bowing low to Julian, the second son of the manor. That's when the long-haired noble drops the news. Sir Roland has completely vanished. Julian explains that he sent Roland to verify if Arthur had really lost his magic, but the guard never reported back. Furious, Julian looms over Silas, demanding to know if his subordinate had the nerve to lie to his face. Silas panics, swearing his reports were true and that something else must have gone sideways. In a fit of rage, Julian grabs a heavy ornament and hurls it, smashing Silas right in the forehead. Julian screams, "If you're telling the truth, then why isn't my warrior back? Do you take me for a fool?" Silas is desperate now. If this mission fails, his betrayal was for nothing. His entire future is down the drain. He begs for more time, promising he'll find Roland and prove he's still loyal. When Julian asks why he should even bother trusting a traitor, Silas goes for broke. He swears on his right arm, his entire life as a swordsman, that he'll fix this. To a man of the blade, that's the ultimate oath. If he fails, his life is effectively over. Young and naive, Marcus asks why he should even trust Lord Cedric. The knight's response: he swears a blood oath on his own right arm. "Listen," Cedric growls. "For a knight, that right arm is his entire life. If he fails this promise, his life is as good as over." With his plans crumbling, Alistair realizes Lord Cedric is dead serious. The third son doesn't budge, leaving the knight no choice but to listen. The ultimatum is brutal. Find the missing elite guard, Sir Tristan, within 4 hours. If he fails, Alistair's life is forfeit. Simple as that. Recognizing this is his final lifeline, Alistair agrees. He's backed into a corner, and he knows it. Back in the present, Alistair storms out of the sanctuary, his mind racing. Ever since Julian appeared, everything has gone completely sideways. He suspects Julian is playing a deeper game. Even if the odds are low, he can't take chances, so he heads straight for Arthur. On his way, he runs into Silas, who looks absolutely spent. The guy is literally vibrating from exhaustion. But Alistair isn't in a sympathetic mood. He slams Silas against the stone wall, fingers digging into his throat. "I told you not to let that brat out of your sight," he roars. He's convinced Silas is treating his orders like a joke. Silas gasps out that he's been loyal, but Alistair isn't buying it, not even for a second. He's convinced his subordinate is plotting something behind his back with the substitute. Then he spots something. Books tucked right inside Silas's tunic. Curious and suspicious, Alistair snatches them to see what's really going on. Silas panics, trying to stop him, but he's too slow. One look at the covers and the damage is done. Alistair's face contorts. Pure, unadulterated rage. He glares at Silas, demanding to know what he's been doing this entire time. Silas sees the murder in Alistair's eyes. He realizes right then, he's completely screwed. Minutes later, the servants are horrified. Alistair is literally dragging Silas's limp, unconscious body through the halls of the Duke's estate. He reaches the guest quarters and kicks the door so hard it nearly flies off its hinges. No remorse, just pure aggression. He tosses the broken Silas toward Arthur like a piece of trash. A clear message: "Don't mess with me." But Arthur, he's chill. He just greets the enraged knight with a calm nod, completely unfazed by the carnage. "Explain yourself. Now," Alistair screams. Arthur just blinks, playing dumb just to get under his skin. That was the wrong move. Alistair slams the door shut. He's decided it's time to teach this rebellious substitute a lesson he won't forget. He stalks toward Arthur, his heart hammering with anxiety he can't quite shake. He's done talking. In a flash, Alistair lunges, pinning Arthur against the wall by his throat. The tension in the room is suffocating. "Try anything funny," Alistair hisses, "and I'll end you right here." He's dead serious. Arthur just smirks. He claims he doesn't remember Alistair saying anything at all. The disrespect is legendary. Fuming, Alistair demands to know what happened to Sir Tristan, the Duke's top guard. Arthur keeps up the act. "Tristan, never heard of him." He's pushing Alistair right to the edge. "Did you kill him?" Alistair growls. Arthur just laughs it off, pointing out he's supposedly too weak to beat a knight. Alistair knows the logic holds up, but his gut is screaming otherwise. Something about this kid just isn't right. Arthur's grin widens. How could a powerless replacement possibly take down a trained elite? It sounds impossible. Alistair flashes back to his report to the Duke. The pressure is mounting, and his hatred for Arthur is boiling over. He pulls a hidden dagger. He's convinced Arthur is the root of all his problems, and it's time to cut them out. His eyes glow with a frantic blue intensity as he lunges for the kill. He wants Arthur dead. Now. Arthur doesn't even flinch. He mocks Alistair for being a traitor who switches sides whenever the wind blows. The fraud who can't fight killed the Duke's best man, Arthur taunts. Alistair swings the blade with everything he has. Crack, a spray of crimson hits the floor. A heavy thud echoes through the room as someone goes down hard. Silence falls. Arthur is still sitting there, perfectly calm, while the guard lies broken at his feet. 3 years, the guard wheezes. He was an orphan who clawed his way up, sacrificing everything to become an elite. He's desperate. He spent every coin and endured 3 years of hell just to survive in this cutthroat kingdom. And now, Arthur ruined it all. By killing Sir Tristan, he's destroyed the guard's only path to safety. Alistair realizes he's a dead man either way. If he stays, the Duke kills him. His only choice is to kill Arthur and run. But wait, a new idea sparks in his twisted mind. There might be another way out of this mess. Sir Tristan is dead, yeah, but Alistair realizes he found something even more valuable, something that could change everything. He doesn't know how Arthur got his hands on it, but it's the ultimate bargaining chip. "Tell me," Alistair demands, eyes wide with greed. "Do you have the rest of that secret combat manual?" He realizes if he brings that manual to the Duke, it'll more than make up for Tristan's death. It's his golden ticket. Cedric plays it cool, claiming he has no idea what's happening, leaving Silas completely baffled by the whole situation. The mercenary figured if things went south, he'd just kill the boy and vanish, though that forbidden tome might be worth staying for. Silas snarled that if Cedric kept playing dumb, he'd grant him a slow, agonizing death, so he'd better give up now. Our boy finally cracks, dropping his resistance and promising to hand over the rest of the secret manual to Silas. Silas pulls the dagger from Cedric's throat, thinking the kid is just another coward who folds when his life is on the line. The young lord stands up and reaches out to the mercenary, who's totally thrown off by the sudden offer of a handshake. Still completely confused, the veteran warrior asks what the hell is going on as Cedric prepares to hand over the manual. But here's the kicker. Cedric reveals the entire forbidden manual is actually locked away inside his own head. He stands tall, telling the man he has one more thing to say, and gives Silas's hand a firm, crushing grip. Cedric thanks the warrior for everything and begins channeling the first of the 8 soul-shattering arts. Dark energy begins to erupt from Silas's body as our protagonist activates the first forbidden technique, the soul shackle. The warrior realizes his mana is being drained and panics, desperately lunging at Cedric with his hidden dagger. Cedric just watches, admitting he'd been wondering who to test this new ability on, and Silas was the perfect target. "Thanks for volunteering," Cedric says with a cold smile. Silas is losing it now, clawing for any way to break free. He strikes Cedric again and again, begging him to stop, but our boy doesn't even move a single muscle. Cedric remains totally undisturbed, focused entirely on finishing the soul shackle ritual while Silas screams in rage. "You're an insane bastard," Silas curses, finally feeling the connection break as he kicks Cedric away to free himself. He's gasping for breath, completely drained. He looks at his trembling hands and realizes his internal mana is gone. He can't feel a thing. Silas stares in horror, wondering if Cedric actually just absorbed his entire life's work. Cedric gets back up, noting that he expected an elite knight to survive that. The soul shackle wasn't enough to end him. Since that didn't do the job, he realizes he'll have to find a much more direct way to kill Silas. Silas is livid. "You think a few dirty tricks are enough to defeat me?" He charges forward like a man possessed. The mercenary lunges at the young lord, but Cedric just stands there, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Silas swings his blade for the kill, but suddenly, boom, a wraith knight appears, catching the blade with ease. Silas is frozen. He can't believe it. This kid blocked a master-level strike without even lifting a finger. His dagger hits the floor. Cedric picks it up, mocking Silas about his complaints regarding dirty tricks. "Let me show you how it's really done," Cedric says. That's when Silas sees the massive demonic shadow looming over him. He's paralyzed. The creature has his hands bound, and Silas can't even move as the shadow closes in. Cedric smiles coldly, telling Silas he's going to return both his stolen mana and his dagger all at once. Without a hint of mercy, Cedric drives the blade straight into the left side of Silas's chest. A perfect hit. "These belong to you," the boy declares, "so I'm giving them back." Silas staggers away, clutching his wound. He's bleeding out fast. He looks down, realizing the wound is in a lethal spot. If he's not careful, it's game over. The dagger is deep. Silas knows if he pulls it out wrong, the hemorrhage will finish him before he can blink. The bastard didn't just steal his mana. He used some kind of supernatural hell force to tear him apart from the inside. But Silas still thinks he has a chance. He forces a smirk, acting like he's still the one holding all the cards. "Did you forget?" Silas gasps. "The poison I gave you." Cedric doesn't flinch. He just tells Silas to keep talking. The mercenary tries to cut a deal. The antidote and a pile of gold in exchange for his life. He claims it's a win-win, but his head is actually spinning with nothing but thoughts of bloody revenge. Suddenly, Silas starts coughing up blood. His legs give out, and he crashes to his knees on the cold ground. Cedric just watches the show. He knew this was coming. He's been 10 steps ahead this whole time. Silas looks at his hands in horror. His mana is circulating like a chaotic storm. It's the poison. It's backfiring. He finally realizes the cause of his collapse is his own venom. Meanwhile, Cedric looks completely relaxed. "Sure, it hurts a bit," Cedric says, looking at his own cuts, "but I'm not the one dying here." He walks toward the kneeling man, explaining that the wounds Silas gave him weren't actually that serious. "But here's the thing," Cedric whispers. "When you stabbed me, your own blood splattered everywhere." He flings the window open wide. Before Cedric can even gasp, Alistair drops a truth bomb. His very blood is pure venom. See, Alistair knew exactly what was in that toxic orb his rival sent. He's been eating poison like candy since he was a kid. His veins are literally flowing with death now. He stalks across the room, looming over the fallen knight with a cold, terrifying smile. "Looking for the antidote," he whispers. Cedric's heart sinks. He realizes right then, there is no way out of this room alive. Alistair starts mocking him. "Why are you trembling? It's embarrassing." The psychological torture is just beginning. He explains the open window. Cold air slows the heart. It keeps the victim alive just a little longer. Talk about cold-blooded. Desperate, Cedric reaches out with shaking hands. He's begging, he's pleading. He offers his soul, his sword, anything for a second chance. He's literally crawling in the dirt now. The Great Knight promises to be Alistair's dog, to lick his boots and obey every whim. Just to stay alive. It's a pathetic sight, honestly, but Alistair, he actually looks, impressed by the desperation. "I like the attitude," Alistair muses. "Keep acting like a loyal hound, and maybe we could actually make this work." Cedric feels a rush of hope. He thinks he's cheated death. He looks at Alistair with pure, pathetic relief in his eyes. But then, the twist. Alistair's voice turns to ice. "Too bad you didn't show me this loyalty from the very start." 𝑯𝒆'𝒔. Alistair drives the dagger straight into the knight's chest. No hesitation, just a clean, brutal strike to end it. He explains why. Cedric is a snake. He switches sides whenever the wind blows. A man like that is useless. Cedric's life flashes before his eyes as he collapses. Alistair just stands there, watching the light fade out of his enemy. Silence fills the chamber. It's over. The legendary martial artist is finally, officially dead. Alistair takes a deep breath. He's relieved, sure, but his body is screaming. That dagger wound he took earlier, yeah, that still stings. Still, he finished this faster than he thought. Was it skill, or just pure dumb luck? Either way, Cedric is gone. He turns his gaze to the side. There's George. Alistair considers killing him too, just to tie up the loose ends. But wait, Cedric never knew Alistair burned the secret manuals. That means George kept his mouth shut. He's actually useful. Get up, George. Alistair barks the order. George jumps. He was totally faking being unconscious this whole time. George is stunned. How did you know, Master? Alistair just smirks. You're a terrible actor, George. I saw you moving. Actually, he's proud. A subordinate who knows when to play dead and keep a secret. That's hard to find these days. Alistair orders him to clear the area. He wants to handle Cedric's body alone. No witnesses for what comes next. He looks at the lifeless night. Time to begin. Alistair reaches out and starts doing something truly forbidden. He's absorbing Cedric's internal energy, his very life force. He feels the warmth rushing into his own veins, but it's not enough. He's not looking for warmth. He's searching for that chilling, sinister energy he felt in the secret pavilion, the essence of death. That's the key, the energy of the kill. Suddenly, a dark, shadowy aura starts swirling around Alistair's entire body. The purple light fades, replaced by pure black. Alistair's eyes light up. The experiment, it actually worked. He can feel it, that same icy sensation from before. It's haunting, it's powerful, and it's exactly what he needed. This dark mana doesn't flow like normal energy. It clusters around his core. To get more, Alistair realizes one thing: he needs more bodies. Watching from the shadows, the blue spirit is absolutely horrified. She's seen some things, but this is different. She turns to the silent monk nearby. Now I see why you let him lead. Her voice is trembling with genuine fear. Her verdict, simple. Alistair isn't just a boy anymore. He's a complete and utter monster. Later, in the High Castle, the first-class guard Julian is confused. He thought Sir Cedric was telling the truth to Lord Adrian. Adrian just shrugs. Of course he was. He knew Cedric wasn't lying, but he had a different plan in mind. He drops some serious leadership wisdom. Kindness breeds arrogance. If you're too nice, people stop respecting you. You have to be strict first. Break them. That way, when you finally show mercy, they'll be loyal for life. Cruelty makes the kindness stand out. Julian is floored. He's never heard anything so cold yet so brilliant. He thinks to himself that Adrian is the only one fit to lead House Oakhaven. Cedric was just a pawn in a bigger game. But the doors fly open. Another guard, Hans, rushes in looking like he's seen a ghost. There's a major problem. The news is insane. Sir Cedric just tried to assassinate the third son, Alistair. The whole court is in an uproar. Adrian and Julian are stunned. Why? Adrian asks. It makes no sense. If Cedric wanted to prove his innocence, this was suicide. But Hans has the real kicker. It doesn't matter why he did it. What matters is what Alistair is saying now. Alistair has gone public. He's telling everyone that Lord Adrian, the second son, was the one who ordered the hit. Lord Alistair is absolutely livid. He snaps at Silas, demanding to know what kind of pathetic lies he's spreading about their family. He wants answers about Sir Arthur's whereabouts, but Silas reveals the man has vanished, last seen at a secret pavilion with the mysterious Alara. That's the final straw. Alistair loses it, cursing his brother Julian's name as pure, unadulterated rage takes over his entire soul. Steel rings out as he draws his blade, swearing he'll never forgive Julian for this betrayal. His guard, Cedric, rushes in to stop the madness. Cedric begs him to think. If Alistair attacks the Duke's manor now, he's just proving Julian's accusations were right all along. Alistair glares at his man, convinced that Julian is sitting back and enjoying this chaos, which is exactly why he can't just stand by. The lead guard suggests a different path. Let someone else do the dirty work while they keep their hands clean. See, Julian told the outer ward that Arthur tried to assassinate him, and if that's the case, the solution is simple. Arthur belongs to a brotherhood of killers with a pride, so twisted it's basically their own cage. For a professional assassin, failure isn't just a mistake, it's a death sentence, even for those who have already retired. The mission is law, period, end of story. Cedric suggests reaching out to the most vicious shadow dwellers in the capital, the Order of the Silent Blades. A terrifying grin spreads across Alistair's face as he realizes the brilliance of the plan. Pure, calculated evil. Later that same night, Cedric is standing watch while Julian, the Duke's third son, sits in deep meditation. The boy is obsessively following that ancient manual, trying to forge a mana core from scratch for the first time. Glowing purple essence, the very breath of the world, begins swirling through his veins like a river of light. He feels it, but then, nothing. The energy shatters and fades away just as it starts to gather. "Cedric!" Julian calls out, and the loyal guard is there in a heartbeat, asking what his young master needs. Julian is frustrated. He's doing everything right, so why does the mana keep leaking out like water through a sieve? Cedric is secretly losing his mind. This kid knew zero magic yesterday, and now he's sensing essence overnight. To sense and move mana this quickly is, well, it's unheard of. The boy is a literal, terrifying prodigy. Cedric thinks about lecturing him, but honestly, he doesn't want to get hit, so he offers to inspect the boy's flow. He explains he'll just tap into Julian's system with his own mana to find exactly where the leak is happening. Trying to stay on Julian's good side, Cedric moves behind him and places his hands firmly on the boy's back. "Just breathe," he says. "Focus on the circulation and leave the rest of the heavy lifting to me." Julian starts the process, and Cedric, he's absolutely stunned by the incredible demonstration happening right before his eyes. This shouldn't be possible. There are no blockages, no friction. The flow is as smooth as glass. The realization hits him like a lightning bolt. He's standing behind a once-in-a-generation genius. But then Cedric's eyes snap shut. He senses it, a cold, sinister shadow lurking deep inside the boy's soul. Boom, their energies collide violently, and Cedric's arms are thrown backward as the power rejects him. Julian stands up, his core failed once again. He looks Cedric in the eye and demands the cold, hard truth. "Can I actually do this?" he asks. Cedric's answer is a grim no. There's something wrong. A strange, freezing presence is sitting right where the core should form, and Cedric has no idea what it is. Julian's heart sinks. That freezing energy is sabotaging him, and for a second, he actually considers just giving up. But as he scrambles for a solution, Cedric mentions that the dispersing energy felt like the polar opposite of normal mana. "It's just a theory," Cedric adds quickly, but Julian's mind is already racing with a dangerous new idea. He thinks out loud. If normal mana is heat, then this death essence inside him is absolute zero. If they are total opposites, then following the standard path is never going to work for him. What if I run it in reverse? Julian wonders. Cedric's face goes pale with pure, unadulterated terror. "Stop, that'll destroy your veins," he screams, but suddenly a crimson liquid snakes out of the shadows. It slams Cedric back and gags him instantly as the azure wraith appears behind him, eyes glowing with malice. She watches Julian with a smirk, thinking the boy is a complete moron for even trying this suicide mission. Here's the catch. She can't kill him herself without getting hurt, but if he kills himself, the contract is broken. She whispers to her spectral companion that their freedom might be coming much sooner than they expected. The second his soul leaves that body, she's going to tear him to pieces. Just wait for it. Night falls over the Hall of Petals. Lady Seraphina waits in the darkness to meet a mysterious guest. The figure steps forward, introducing herself as Luna, an oracle from the legendary Order of the Phoenix. Seraphina is skeptical. Their master just died, so why send this young girl all by herself? Even weirder, Luna brought the old master's corpse with her. It's a grisly sight. But Luna knows what she's doing. She says Master Merrick's body is the perfect tool to track his killer. That's when it hits Seraphina. Luna called the old man a student. This girl is high-ranking. But before the work begins, the oracle has one thing to make clear. Lord Arthur will die, no matter what. Seraphina's eyes light up. That's exactly what she wanted to hear. "I didn't like you before," Seraphina purrs, "but now you've completely won me over." Suddenly, the air turns ice cold. A violent blue aura erupts around the oracle's body. She starts chanting, hands lock together, just like that. The dead body begins to twitch. The ritual reaches its peak. She calls out the steel mandate and prepares the final strike. Luna pulls a ritual dagger, and bam, plunges it straight into the corpse's cold heart. A terrifying energy pours out as the old man's body convulses. It's nightmare fuel. Then, something horrifying happens. Spectral hands start crawling right out of the dead flesh. These hands have a target. They race across the kingdom, hunting for the azure spirit and the night. They find our hero. Arthur is meditating, totally defenseless. This is a disaster waiting to happen. The guardian knight sees the danger. He leaps in front of the boy, shield ready. But those arms are brutal. They smash the knight into the wall, leaving him bleeding and broken. The azure spirit watches closely. She realizes the truth. This is a soul mirror curse. Back at the hall, Seraphina is watching in awe. Every time Luna stabs the corpse, Arthur suffers. Luna is relentless. She keeps stabbing Master Merrick's body, determined to end Arthur's life right now. The knight tries to stand, but he's hurting. Meanwhile, Seraphina is practically drooling over the agony. The oracle shows no mercy. The spectral hands give up on the knight and lunge for Arthur again. Luna strikes with the dagger once more. Seraphina can only think about seeing the prince suffer more. But the azure spirit has seen enough. What an inferior creature, she sneers at the curse. With one clean swipe of spiritual energy, she shears those spectral hands right off. Who dares touch my prey? The spirit's eyes lock onto Luna's location through the void. She sees the oracle perfectly, and she is absolutely furious that someone tried to interfere. Leave, now. The spirit doesn't just block the attack, she prepares a massive counterstrike. She gathers the severed hands and fires them back like a cannon toward Luna's location. That attack travels miles in seconds. It slams directly into the oracle with earth-shattering force. Boom, Luna and the corpse are sent flying. Seraphina rushes over, panicking and asking if she's alive. Impossible, Luna coughs. Her dark ritual was just slapped aside like it was nothing. She realizes the truth. There wasn't just a basic spirit there was something far more dangerous. But Luna isn't backing down. She tells Seraphina the price just went up, way up. She wants 1,000 gold sovereigns to compensate for the risk she's taking. Seraphina balks. She already paid 500, but Luna snaps back. She's literally risking her life. This is a high-rank calamity spirit, Seraphina. Most oracles would be dead by now. Anything stronger than a basic spirit is a disaster. It can level a whole town. But lucky for you, I'm an exception. Luna's talent is off the charts, and Seraphina knows it. Seraphina hesitates, then agrees. Fine, you'll get your 1,000 sovereigns. But in exchange, Arthur must be eliminated, no more failures. Luna tosses her coat aside, revealing her true power. Listen, oracles have ranks just like spirits. From top to bottom, high divine, solar, lunar, gifted, and shadow. And I'm just getting started. Selene is on a whole other level compared to Alaric, a mere squire with only 5 years of basic training. Her eyes flare with light as she reveals her master tier rank, making Duchess Alina's heart skip a beat. Alina had expected an ancient crone, not this young girl, and honestly, she thought the priestess was lying. But then, shadows erupt from Selene's body as she declares herself one of the 3 great witches of the solar citadel. Her specialty, binding soul servants. The sheer, crushing weight of her aura suffocates everyone in the room. She flings the door open, coldly promising Alina that the 3rd prince, Julian, has 0 chance of surviving this. Meanwhile, back at the hideout, Arthur is still locked in deep meditation, while Seraphina watches over him. She's annoyed by these little pests interfering, knowing her entire plan goes up in smoke if Arthur dies here. But as she looks at him, she freezes. Arthur is radiating something wrong, something absolutely terrifying. It's the essence of the grave, the literal energy of death, pouring out of him like a dark flood. She's stunned. How could a living human possibly harness death mana? It makes 0 sense, right? Seraphina realizes right then, this kid is anything but normal. He's something else entirely. Arthur mastered the ancient circulation ritual in a heartbeat and is now absorbing death mana while still breathing. Arthur's eyes snap open as a dark, swirling aura begins to coat his skin like a shroud. Even the cynical Seraphina has to admit, she's finally starting to find this boy interesting. Arthur is thrilled. His gamble paid off. Reversing his mana flow kept the energy from vanishing this time. He hasn't formed a mana core yet, but Seraphina, the blonde spirit, just stares, asking if he's actually still alive. Arthur's confused, telling her to check for herself, while she wonders how a human can hold such dark power. Our boy is just as baffled. He had no idea he wasn't supposed to be able to do that. Changing the subject, Arthur looks around and asks what the hell happened in the room while he was out. Seraphina sighs, telling him he's a bit slow on the uptake. He walks over and sees the chaos. The corrupted friar and his guard are totally out cold, but the blonde girl says she's not sure why. Suddenly, the friar wakes up and starts blabbering everything he knows back to his master. Seraphina loses it. She calls him a complete idiot and decides to shut him up for good. She starts attacking the traitorous monk and Arthur. He's just watching, thinking she's one persistent girl. She snaps back that he should be grateful she stopped a soul-severing assassination, not that he understands what that is. Before he can ask, a bone-chilling sound echoes through the hall. Everyone feels a sudden, sharp dread. The blonde goes silent. Arthur asks what it is, just as a terrifying voice whispers from the shadows. Something is approaching Prince Julian's door. A thick, oily dark energy begins to seep through the cracks. Seraphina's eyes go wide. Who would be crazy enough to bind a mountain wraith as their sole servant? She explains it's a legendary spirit of the peaks, but Arthur realizes the shadow is actually millions of bugs. It's a granite-piercing behemoth, a swarm that can eat through solid stone. Absolute nightmare fuel. The narrator breaks it down. Spirits of the peaks are shadows, while the ones from the deep are ghouls. For ages, people have feared these disaster bringers, and right now, one is perched on Seleni's arm. It looks like a crow made of pure ink, landing on the priestess with a sinister, one-eyed glare. The creature lets out a screech, signaling it's ready to do its mistress's bidding. Selene releases the monster, and it takes flight, hungry for its next target. This thing is a freak of nature, a bird with a serpent's tail that commands lethal swarms. The high priestess watches her pet fly toward our hero, surrounded by a cloud of buzzing death. She reflects that among witches, there's no such thing as friendship. They all live too close to the grave. She didn't care about her dead disciple, but seeing a familiar face twisted by spirits, not exactly fun. More insects swarm around her, completely under her control, as she forms a deadly magical seal. She declares that the third son, Prince Arthur, will be nothing more than food for her swarm. Back with our hero, a massive tide of insects is heading his way, and he is seriously weirded out. Meanwhile, Julian, still protected by the blue spirit spell, is fast asleep until he is violently disturbed. Arthur is jolted awake by a sharp strike to the face. His loyal knight, Cedric, is shouting for him to wake up because they're being swarmed by something nightmarish. Thousands of crawling insects are everywhere. Cedric is panicking, asking what's going on, but Arthur just demands his knight get it together and start fighting back. Cedric is stunned as he looks down at his own hand. It's a mangled, bloody mess. He only touched the bugs for a single second, yet the damage is absolutely horrifying. Seeing the carnage, Arthur realizes the danger is real. He barks at Cedric to focus his inner mana immediately to create a protective barrier before they're eaten alive. Arthur grits his teeth. These bugs might be small, but their sheer numbers are insane. At this rate, it'll only take a few minutes for them to devour everyone. High above, the frost wraith Seraphina watches the chaos with a smug, mocking grin. She asks Arthur what his next move is now that he's about to become bug food. Our hero tries to bargain, asking the spectral blonde for an assist, but Seraphina isn't feeling generous. She tells him she has zero reason to help him for free. She makes a chilling offer. She'll consider saving his life, but only if she can take full possession of his body. Arthur tells her to forget it, not happening. He lashes out at the attacking swarm, frustrated that these pests are becoming such a massive, deadly nuisance. Sensing his desperation, Serafina proposes a gamble. Since he won't hand over his body willingly, she decides they should settle his fate with a bet. The rules are simple. If Arthur ends up on the brink of death, he loses, and she claims his physical form as her own right then and there. But if the young noble actually manages to survive this impossible nightmare, she'll serve him and provide help whenever he calls from that day forward. Arthur doesn't hesitate for a second. "Keep that promise," he growls, instantly crushing a venomous centipede that was crawling up his arm. Meanwhile, Cedric is in a state of absolute terror. The swarm is growing thicker by the second, closing in on them from every corner of the dark room. The knight is losing his mind, unsure of how to survive. Arthur, however, stays cold and calculated, ordering Cedric to find anything flammable nearby. He plans to incinerate the whole place. Cedric thinks it's going way too far, but Arthur is way past caring about the furniture or the room's safety. Without warning, Arthur taps into his hidden power. A deep purple aura flares around his hand as he telekinetically yanks a distant lantern across the room. Cedric is speechless at the display, but Arthur doesn't waste time explaining. He immediately uses the flame to ignite a handkerchief, creating a makeshift torch. Arthur's mind is racing. He's already deduced that Lady Beatrice is the one who orchestrated this, and she definitely has a shaman working for her. He figures that if he starts a massive fire, the resulting chaos will be the perfect cover to hunt down that shaman and end this once and for all. Outside, the seer Alara gives a cold command to her beasts. Suddenly, the scattered insects inside the room begin to take a solid, terrifying form. The creatures sensed the heat and immediately lunged at the focal point of the fire Arthur was creating, desperate to extinguish his only hope. Alara strolls through the mansion corridors, laughing at Arthur's pitiful little tricks. She's completely convinced that his end is near and there's no escape. She's incredibly arrogant, muttering to herself about her all-seeing eye, a mystical gift that allows her to see things that remain hidden from everyone else. This special sight lets her track the flow of mana through solid walls. Arthur's every move is laid bare before her. He can't hide behind anything. It's revealed she can observe the entire room with that right eye. She reaches a wall near Arthur, and with a casual touch, she completely destroys it. Alara enters the space with total confidence, but Arthur doesn't even flinch. He just gives her a cold welcome as she begins to analyze her enemy. Suddenly, one of Arthur's spirit guardians, the spectral monk, strikes at her. Alara is fast, though, using an incantation to summon multiple ghostly hands. The spirit hands strike the monk without mercy. The shaman literally steps on the monk's head, declaring that his efforts are completely useless against her. She taunts Arthur, claiming she can see absolutely everything. At that moment, Cedric tries to hurl a hidden dagger at her to end the fight. But Alara reacts instantly. She pulls out a magic seal and whispers a few words, launching a brutal lightning attack directly at Cedric. Cedric is blasted by the bolts and forced to drop his knife. Arthur dives for the blade, quickly arming himself to mount a desperate counterattack. Alara isn't giving him an inch. She immediately calls upon her beast's power to unleash a fresh, massive swarm of insects directly at Arthur. Without a moment's hesitation, the sea of creatures charges toward the boy, ready to devour him alive in a matter of seconds. Seeing the thick cloud of pests swarming toward him, the young noble realizes things are about to get really, really bad. He's hit full force by the swarm and scent flying, his body slamming hard against the cold stone wall of the chamber. With a black crow perched on her hand, Alara tells the third son of the house that it's time to cross into the spirit realm and die. Immediately, several of the tiny creatures begin forming a violent whirlwind around Arthur, who seems to have gone completely unresponsive. However, the boy doesn't actually seem to be affected by the terror, almost as if he's been waiting for this exact moment to strike. The girl watches her attack finish, slowly approaching our protagonist to savor her victory. Cedric lies unconscious on the floor after the lightning strike, leaving Arthur alone to face the shaman's final judgment. But as the dust settles, the look on Arthur's face isn't one of defeat. It's the look of someone who just trapped their hunter. The whirlwind of insects continues to howl, yet Arthur stands his ground, his purple aura beginning to pulse with a new, dangerous intensity. Alara's confidence wavers for just a split second as she realizes the boy isn't screaming. He's smiling. The battle for the mansion has only just begun, and the shaman is about to learn why you never corner a wounded lion. Arthur the Knight is completely paralyzed by Lady Seleni's wicked spell, while his comrade lies unconscious nearby. The sorceress thinks this was far too easy and wonders if the boy was just a fraud after all. She strokes her shadow raven, gloating over her victory and praising the beast for a job well done. "Time to go," she sneers, leaving them to be ripped apart by her swarm of man-eating insects. She starts to walk away, convinced the mission was a breeze. But then something impossible happens. Arthur begins to stand, and without a hint of hesitation, he plunges his own dagger deep into his arm. Blood sprays everywhere, and every insect it touches falls dead instantly. His very blood is a lethal poison. Selene is absolutely horrified. She's never seen a maniac willing to butcher himself just to win a fight. He keeps slashing his own flesh, painting the ground red just to wipe out every last one of those vile creatures. Finally, Arthur stands tall, drenched in his own blood, a vision of absolute insanity that chills the very soul. His expression, pure terror. He doesn't even flinch at the pain, looking like a demon from the abyss. Before Selene can even process what's happening, Arthur charges at her with the speed of a lightning strike. "What a pity," he growls, swinging his cursed blade. "Turns out my blood is the perfect cure for pests." He blitzes past her, and the shock of the attack sends the sorceress tumbling to the cold ground. Panicked, she commands her raven to strike. The bird lets out a piercing shriek, unleashing a wave of pure darkness. Selene realizes her insects are useless, so she tries to buy time for one final, devastating spell. Golden light erupts from her palms as she channels her spiritual power into a desperate command. But Arthur doesn't care about her light. He initiates a mind-shattering technique to bind the beast instead. In an instant, the shadow raven is yanked through the air, as if caught by an invisible hand. Arthur catches the creature mid-flight, his fingers locking around its throat like a vice. Selene is losing it. "What are you doing?" she screams, watching her familiar struggle for air. Arthur just tightens his grip, his eyes cold and empty. "Finally," he whispers, "everything is quiet now." The sorceress rushes him, but she's suddenly hit by a wave of agonizing, soul-crushing pain. She's enraged. The raven's suffering is being funneled directly into her through their dark, magical connection. The bird screams in agony, and Selene notices something even more terrifying. Arthur is actually draining its power. It should be impossible. Absorbing demonic energy like that would melt the insides of any normal human being. But as she looks at him, she realizes Arthur is already overflowing with the cold energy of death. Even our hero is surprised. He only grabbed the bird to stop it screeching, but things just got interesting. The dark energy inside the raven is massive, an absolute flood of power rushing into his veins. It's more energy than he's ever taken before, far more than any of the souls he's harvested recently. This might actually be enough to form a new energy core. Selene begs him to stop before the bird dies. Arthur's only response, a dark, twisted smile. He's already thinking of a much more sinister plan. Meanwhile, back at Rose Manor, the servants are shivering in the bitter, unnatural cold of the night. They ask why Duchess Isabella is waiting outside, but the lady refuses to go back in yet. She has to know the result. If things go south, she's ready to step in and end it herself. She had given the sorceress 2 tasks: kill Arthur and bring back the forbidden grimoire at any cost. If that book falls into the wrong hands, her entire plan to rule the kingdom will crumble to dust. "Wait, someone's coming," a subordinate shouts. A figure slowly emerges from the thick, dark fog. It's Selene. Isabella's heart leaps with joy, assuming the job is finally done and Arthur is dead. She's already celebrating, dreaming of the day her son finally takes the throne and becomes the Duke. Her servants start showering her with praise, making the proud Duchess feel like she's already won the war. But as the sorceress gets closer, the celebration dies. Something is very, very wrong with Lady Selene. Isabella's smile fades. "Why have you stopped? Tell me. Is the deed done?" she demands. Selene collapses, trembling as she delivers the news. "We failed. Arthur is still alive and coming for us." Isabella stands there, frozen in shock. Her perfect world just came crashing down in a single second. It was official. The boy was a cunning devil. A total mastermind who'd orchestrated every single detail, knowing exactly how this chaos would unfold the moment he returned. Let's go back to the moment Selene begged Alastair to stop. The boy's response? Ice cold. He'd only stop if she turned her back on Lady Beatrice and exposed the truth. He laid it out plain and simple. Even if he killed the girl, the High Council would just send another assassin. No, he wanted something better. He wanted her to drag the First Lady's name through the mud. His logic was brilliant. If she talked, the Order of the Sunbird and Lady Beatrice would become instant enemies. And now, back in the present. Selene is sweating. She knows that by doing this, she's basically a traitor to the Order. But Alastair has her backed into a corner. She has zero choice. She finally snaps and tells the crowd the truth. She claims the First Lady lied about young Master Alastair being possessed by a demon. But wait, it gets better. Selene shouts it for the whole estate to hear. Lady Beatrice specifically asked the Order to exterminate the spirit and kill Gideon, but the young Master. He was perfectly normal the whole time. Selene looks Beatrice right in the eye and tells her to never, ever bring such filth to the Order again. Exposed, Beatrice is panicking as the entire Cavendish mansion hears the news. The First Lady was trying to murder the family's third son. The crowd goes wild. Orders are barked out to send guards to the Rose Petal Hall and arrest the First Lady immediately. Beatrice's own men. They realize the outer guard is coming for her. They try to warn her, but it's too late. Beatrice looks absolutely horrified. She's realizing this is all Alastair's fault, but the trap has already snapped shut. Meanwhile, Selene quietly slips away from the absolute carnage she just started. She passes by a window, and there he is, Alastair. Cool as a breeze, questioning if she finally followed his commands. Our boy is still casually choking the life out of the shaman's familiar spirit, threatening it with a smirk. Selene bites her lip and confirms the deed is done. She's beyond frustrated. She mutters to herself that everything, literally everything, happened exactly the way Alastair wanted. In one move, Lady Beatrice is now the Order's #1 enemy and a total villain in the eyes of the public. Talk about a pro-gamer move. But Selene has her own problems. She's worried about herself. She just betrayed her own order just to save her precious familiar spirit from Alastair's grip. She tells our protagonist that it's time to go and demands he return her spirit just like he promised. Alastair just gives her this sly, dangerous smile. He's not done. Before he lets her go, he's got one more thing on his mind. He's got a specific question, and it's a big one. After a tense silence, Selene asks if he really wants to know the secrets of the spirit hierarchy. Alastair doesn't hesitate. He wants intel. He needs to know about the people who control spirits, the cursed monks and those shadowy featherheads. Selene watches him, and it clicks. Our boy isn't possessed, he's a master. He's got a familiar spirit of his own, which is absolutely insane for someone his age. She can't wrap her head around how he did it, but there's something else, something darker. She feels another presence, a spirit filled with so much pure resentment it sends literal chills down her spine. But Alastair doesn't care about her feelings. He tightens his grip on that poor crow's neck. One look at his eyes and Selene knows he's not joking. She starts talking, and fast. She explains the 6 tiers of the spirit hierarchy: feral, monstrous, mystic, demonic, sacred, and the legendary divine beasts. She tells him that in the Order of the Sunbird, only 3 people can actually control these beasts as familiars: and she's one of them. Another is a man named 𝒆'𝒔, a powerhouse who's been a massive help to the Grandmaster by taming strange mountain beasts called stone crushers. Even she doesn't know the full limit of his power, which says a lot. But then there's the big boss, the master of the order. She isn't sure what kind of spirit the master keeps, but one thing is certain: it's a high-tier nightmare. Alistair is intrigued. He asks if the master has a sacred or even a divine beast in his arsenal. Selene just shakes her head. Those things, they're just legends, stories for kids. Finding someone with a sacred beast is like finding a needle in a haystack. It's way more likely the master has a mystic or demonic tier spirit. Still terrifying, but at least it's grounded in reality. She reaches into her robes, pulls out an ancient book on spirit lore, and hands it over to Alistair. A parting gift. Alistair takes it and actually says thanks. He's looking at the book, thinking about that Earthshaker beast he encountered and the sheer amount of mana it had. He starts wondering what the master's spirit must be like if a mid-tier beast was that strong. Having a high-level spirit would be a literal cheat code. But he knows getting one would be a nightmare. Without a second thought, he tosses the crow back to Selene. "Good job," he says, like he didn't just ruin her life. He actually has the nerve to ask if she's going to thank him. Selene is fuming, but she forces out a thank you through gritted teeth. After that total display of cold-blooded cruelty, Alistair finally lets her leave. Even Sir Gareth, who was watching the whole time, is disturbed by how harsh his master is. Selene is beyond embarrassed and furious. She storms out of the room, her blood boiling at how she was played. On the flip side, Alistair is absolutely loving life. He's having a lucky day, no, a legendary day. Lady Beatrice is finished. She'll be under the microscope of everyone in the mansion now. She can't touch him anymore. Plus, all that juicy ether from the Earthshaker beast is flowing through his veins. It's finally enough. Enough for him to forge his own mana core. Now he can finally master the true arts of the sword and become the powerhouse he was meant to be. Suddenly, Sir Gareth approaches him, looking worried. He asks if Alistair is sure everything will be okay. The boy just smiles. The game is just beginning. Arthur's mentor is playing it cool, but Cedric is sweating bullets. He wonders if Arthur is even a little bit worried about the witch's grudge. Arthur knows she's coming for blood, and he actually agrees with the danger. But then he just shrugs it off. He's dead certain Lady Selene can't touch him. Little does he know, she's already in the shadows, closing a dark deal with a mysterious contact. "Time to pay up," she snarls. Her familiar spirit is mangled, barely clinging to life. Selene doesn't care if the creature dies. All she can think about is Arthur. His name is like poison in her mind, fueling a pure, white-hot rage. She glares at the Sterling estate. She's retreating for now, but she's promising a nightmare when she returns. Then a voice from the dark laughs. "Planning a comeback, are we?" Selene nearly jumps out of her skin. She dodges a phantom strike as the world goes dead silent. Something is very, very wrong. Her red eye begins to weep blood. The sensation is alien, heavy, and absolutely terrifying. She senses a power so evil it makes her skin crawl. Suddenly, hands reach out from the void behind her. Red nails dig into her face, squeezing her eye until more blood spills out. It's brutal. Through a haze of red tears, she sees her ultimate nightmare. The Azure spirit is standing right there. Bathed in the glow of a blood moon, Seraphina smiles. "You're still quite the beauty," she purrs, "even without that eye." The blood from Selene's eye starts flowing into her own mouth. She's suffocating. She can't breathe. Lights out for the witch. Meanwhile, Lady Eleanor is throwing a massive tantrum, slamming tables and screaming about slander. She's accusing Arthur of framing her, acting like the ultimate victim in front of Lord Alaric. "Do you really think I'd hurt the Duke?" she cries. She's laying it on thick, claiming it's all a conspiracy. She swears the witch and the third son are out to destroy her reputation. But Alaric has zero patience for the drama. One word from him, and Eleanor shuts her mouth fast. He demands silence, then brings up the chaos at the infirmary from the day before. Eleanor tries to pivot. claiming Arthur broke the rules by entering the Duke's forbidden wing. Alaric isn't buying it. Arthur saved the Duke's life. He looks Alina dead in the eye and asks if she was the one trying to kill him. She tries to deny it, but Alaric's presence is so crushing she physically can't speak. "This isn't going away," he growls. He's not letting a single detail slide. A full investigation is launched. Alina is under the microscope now. The second and third sons are being dragged into the spotlight too. Cut to Arthur, sitting in a swirl of necrotic mist. Alaric is feeling uneasy. Something about this whole situation smells like a trap. He can't figure out why Alina and the second son are so desperate to kill Arthur. Power struggles are normal, sure, but Arthur was always the weak link. Why target him? There's a hidden reason here. And Arthur, he's not acting like the arrogant brat Alaric remembers. Usually, the boy is a total pain, but during the interrogation, he was different. Alaric thought it was just trauma from almost dying, but the vibe was just off. He realizes he can't trust anyone else. He's going to investigate Arthur himself. Back at Arthur's place, Serafina steps through a portal while he's deep in meditation. She finds the monk watching over him as he sits perfectly still. She's actually impressed. Arthur managed to drain a massive amount of mana from that iron-scaled behemoth. Using death energy to build a mana heart sounded insane, but looking at him now, it might actually work. She moves in closer, watching him in the silence of the room. He's actually kind of handsome, she thinks, but then boom, Arthur's eyes snap open. He catches her staring, dead to rights. Serafina completely loses her cool. She spins around, blushing like crazy, and swears she wasn't doing anything. Arthur starts teasing her, totally playful. She snaps back, yelling at him to focus on his mana circulation. Arthur just laughs. Serafina is fuming, regretting the bet and cursing the witch for failing. Suddenly, Arthur gets serious. He's got to check something important. He needs to know if this mana heart is the exact one Serafina warned him about. Before Lyra can even warn him that a mana core takes weeks, not hours, and that pushing this hard will only waste his energy, she stops. Her eyes widen. There, right in the center of the room, Alaric is radiating a massive aura. A core is already solidifying in his gut. This is impossible. She's completely floored. "Let me see that," she whispers, leaning in to verify the miracle. Alaric, curious, asks what's up, and the spirit reaches out. She wants to feel the core directly, pressing her fingertips against his skin. But the moment she does, something feels wrong, seriously wrong. Alaric winces, asking what she's doing, but she's just staring at her hand. She felt the core, but it didn't react. Confused, Alaric asks for an explanation, but the spirit is totally stumped. She turns to her companion, suggesting they test something. Alaric is lost, but the blonde spirit just shakes her head. She's questioning everything. Is it because she's a spectral familiar? She needs a guinea pig. Her eyes lock onto Arthur, who's passed out in the corner. She drifts over, a wicked idea in mind. She pokes Arthur's core, and he bolts upright with a blood-curdling scream. Okay, it works on him. Arthur is howling in pain, but Lyra just rolls her eyes. "So dramatic," she scoffs. Then she turns back to Alaric. "The problem isn't me," she mutters. He asks if there's another way to check, but before she can answer, the air changes. Cold, heavy. Both of them snap their heads toward the door. Someone's out there. A voice calls out. It's Sir Cedric. "Young master, are you awake?" Alaric narrows his eyes. Why is he here so late? Cedric is a legend in House Thorn, served 2 generations. He's the pillar of the estate and the elders. Trust him implicitly. Even Lady Isabella stays out of his way. Right now, he's the most powerful man in the manor. The door creaks open. Cedric enters, looking concerned. Alaric plays it cool, asking what brings the veteran knight here. Cedric bows low. "I've come to apologize," he says. "Despite our guards, you were still targeted by assassins." He stays bowed, showing deep respect. Alaric immediately tells him to stand. "There's no need for all this," he says, with a forced, gentle smile. He tells the knight he's perfectly fine, but Cedric isn't finished yet. Suddenly, Cedric steps forward, reaching for Alaric's head. Alaric freezes, watching the man's hand move like a viper. Then the knight's face changes. That respectful mask, it shatters into a cold, sharp smile as he pats Alaric's shoulder. "Where is it?" Cedric asks, glancing around. "The dagger I gave you, the one for self-defense." Alaric's heart skips a beat. Dagger? He has no clue what the man is talking about. This feels like a trap. Cedric presses him. "You didn't lose it, did you?" Alaric's eyes flicker toward Arthur for a split second. "Right, the dagger," Alaric says, playing along. "I kept it in the bedside drawer." Cedric nods slowly. "Good," the knight chuckles. "It would have been a tragedy to lose such a fine blade." But then Alaric stops. "Actually," he says, his voice cold, "I don't recall ever receiving a dagger from you, Sir Cedric." The air turns to ice. Cedric's smile vanishes. "Correct," he snaps. "I never gave you one." Then he lunges. A fist flies toward Alaric's face, but our boy is fast. He leaps back, perching on the headboard like a predator. Cedric doesn't stop. "You made 2 fatal mistakes," he growls, his hands moving in a blur of strikes. He aims for Alaric's pressure points. "First," he says, "you got arrogant, you forgot your place. And second, usually you cower. You run whenever someone raises a hand. But tonight, you didn't flinch." He strikes Alaric's mana circuits, certain he's just paralyzed the boy. "It's over," Cedric declares, breathing hard. "You're not moving again until you tell me who you really are." But then, something impossible happens. Alaric, who should be a heap on the floor, lands perfectly on his feet. Cedric's jaw drops. How are you?" Alaric doesn't answer. He just smiles, a terrifying, predatory grin. Suddenly, a shadow rips open behind him. Lyra emerges from the portal. One strike. She's behind Cedric in a flash, her fingers inches from his beating heart. "How dare you touch him?" she hisses into his ear. "You really must have a death wish, don't you?" Alaric just watches, unbothered. "Not bad," he says to the spirit. "You're even more talented than I thought." Lyra explains the trick. Since she controls the energy of death, Alaric used it to nullify the knight's strike. A body that ignores pressure point attacks without even using mana. "You're a freak of nature," she laughs. But her eyes turn serious. "You have a core now, but they've seen it. You can't stay in House Thorn anymore." Alaric stares at the fallen knight, a dark thought crossing his mind. "Yeah," he murmurs, "I didn't expect this." With his cover blown, Arthur thinks fast. He commands the spectral shade to seize the body of Baron William. Elara laughs, mocking how Arthur is essentially a monster himself. Meanwhile, the confused Baron, he is completely lost. He has no clue who Arthur is talking to. But suddenly, purple veins crawl across his skin like a dark curse. A crushing weight slams into him. He is drowning in pressure, wondering what on earth is happening to his body. Deep down, William is reeling. This boy looks exactly like the third young lord, but the secret acupuncture. It failed. Now something is squeezing his heart. He can't sense Arthur's presence at all. Has he discovered a secret he wasn't meant to? Horrified, he watches as spectral hands erupt from the shade's mouth, clawing their way into William's physical shell. Terrified, Cedric asks who Arthur really is. The answer: "I am Arthur, the 3rd son of the Highville estate." Next day, sunrise over the valley. Inside the mansion, Sir Cedric is pacing, feeling like the world's turned upside down. He remembers waking up to a destroyed bed, and the external guards, they are actually being polite for once. Just yesterday, they treated Arthur and his man like absolute garbage, nothing more than outcasts and criminals. Suddenly, a guard stops him. He bows low, offering Cedric a warm, respectful greeting out of nowhere. Cedric bows back, but his head is spinning. What on earth is going on in this madhouse? As Cedric nears his master's study, he sees a shadow that makes his blood run cold. He is paralyzed. Inside, the high-ranking Baron William is standing right beside Arthur, waiting like a loyal servant. Arthur notices his guard has arrived. He dismisses the Baron with a wave, and William obeys instantly. The Baron passes Cedric with a silent nod. Arthur, he is just sitting there, calmly eating breakfast like nothing happened. Cedric is desperate for answers. He is watching the impossible unfold right in front of his eyes. He demands to know what's going on, but Arthur, he just tells him to sit down and eat first. Arthur says they will talk after breakfast, but first, he has a favor to ask his loyal guard. Cedric sits, eager to help, telling Arthur he can ask for anything. Then comes the curveball. Arthur asks to be taught the basics of the 𝒉 martial arts. Cedric literally spits out his food in shock. He stares at Arthur. Is he actually serious? The third son of the Duke wants to learn the basics. Arthur explains that he tried learning from a secret manual earlier, but the moves felt wrong, disconnected. He asks Alara about it. He followed the book perfectly, so why wouldn't the forms flow together? The blonde spirit watches his movements. After a beat, she gives it to him straight. Those techniques are too advanced. These moves were designed for masters, not beginners. They require a high-level understanding he just doesn't have yet. Plain and simple. You can't master elite knight techniques without a solid foundation. You are skipping steps. It is like trying to build a castle by starting with the roof. She explains those forms are for refining power. They are meant for someone who has already reached a peak and wants to shatter their current limits. The goal is removing wasted movement, but for Arthur, it is useless. He doesn't even know the fundamental stances. Without the basics, she concludes, that legendary technique is essentially a pile of gibberish. Arthur turns to Cedric, explaining that he can't grasp the diamond soul style without proper basic training. Cedric leaps up, slamming his hands on the table. He is vibrating with excitement. Does Arthur really want this? Does he plan to become the next Duke? Arthur shuts that down fast. That is not the goal here. He just wants the power. He knows he will need to be stronger for what is coming in the near future. Cedric argues that it is more than just useful. It is a legendary skill that every knight in the land would kill for. It is the ultimate prize. But he warns Arthur, mastering something this big will paint a target on his back. Arthur doesn't care. He says he won't be flaunting it around like a fool. But then, Cedric deflates. He admits he can't actually teach Arthur the basics of their house. There is a major catch. He doesn't even know them himself. The foundational arts of the 𝒉 house are a strictly guarded secret. They are reserved only for the bloodline. Only the inner family members are allowed to learn the true core. The new 𝒉 forms and the beginner's blade. Only those born with the name are granted that knowledge. Only the Duke himself and Arthur's brothers actually know the techniques he needs to move forward. Arthur's heart sinks. Are they really the only ones with the keys to his power? Sadly, Cedric nods. Cedric warned that the situation was dire since Arthur was surrounded by hostile rivals and wasn't even a true noble by blood. But the young lord stood up abruptly, deciding he had no choice but to play his final card. "Follow me," he commanded. Cedric asked where they were headed, and Arthur simply replied that he was off to find a teacher for those knightly arts. The guard asked where they were going, and Arthur replied he was looking for someone who could actually master those forbidden techniques. Cedric tried to stop him, warning it would look suspicious, but the boy snapped back that greatness requires living without fear. He retorted that he couldn't accomplish a single thing if he spent his life hiding in fear of being discovered by others. The guard was about to ask who on earth could train him, but then he saw something so shocking it left him speechless. A short while later, watching the training field, the guard couldn't believe his eyes. Arthur had actually chosen the youngest brother, Lucius. He'd set his sights on Lucius because the boy was obsessed with training, the most lethal swordsman of all the noble siblings. Arthur stepped forward to speak, but Cedric immediately grabbed his shoulder, desperately trying to pull him back from certain disaster. Cedric reminded him once again of that dark day, when Arthur had publicly insulted the young lord's mother during a feast. Arthur brushed it off, saying he already knew, but Cedric was still haunted by the memory of Arthur's screaming in agony. He remembered it clearly, the third young lord's ribs and legs shattered in multiple places. It was a brutal, bloody mess. It was a complete disaster, and to make matters worse, Lucius still held a deep, burning grudge against the third young lord. Most importantly, Lucius was a prodigy, a master knight at only 16 years old, a total monster of a talent. The spectral lady watching beside them whispered that the youngest brother was indeed a very useful piece to have. She noted that there weren't many people his age with such a massive aura, acknowledging the boy was a true genius. Smiling, she warned Arthur to be careful, since her own powers were limited during the brightness of the day. Despite the chilling warnings, Arthur remained perfectly calm and unfazed by the threat looming right in front of him. Cedric closed his eyes in defeat, suggesting they abandon this crazy idea and find someone else to help them. But when he opened them, he realized the young master was already walking right up to the youngest lord, Lucius. Lucius was mid-training, tensing his muscles, when he spotted his brother. Immediately, the air grew heavy with his sheer resentment. He began to radiate a murderous aura and pure rage at the sight of Arthur. Our hero simply raised his hand. He greeted his brother casually. Lucius was baffled. Why wasn't he shaking? "Get lost," he growled, "unless you want another beating." Then he noticed something strange and broke his stance. In Arthur's hand was the family's secret manual of ancient swordplay. With a look of a man making a deal, Arthur asked his brother if he was interested in the book. Lucius narrowed his eyes, demanding to know if the thing was even genuine. Without a word, Arthur tossed the relic over. Lucius caught the book in midair, flipped through the pages, and his jaw nearly hit the floor. It was real. It contained every secret principle for mastering the blade, the legendary manual belonging to the Duke of the house himself. But then he noticed the missing sections. Confused and angry, he barked at Arthur, demanding to know where they were. Arthur just tapped his own temple, implying the missing pages were safely locked away inside his own memory. Irritated, Lucius demanded to know where Arthur stole the book, but Arthur stayed perfectly cool and unbothered by the questioning. "Doesn't matter where it came from," Arthur replied. "What matters is that it's mine now." Lucius exploded in a fury. He accused Arthur of using the book to climb the social ladder, thinking it would make him the next duke. Lucius hurled the book back at him and ordered him out. Arthur just calmly picked it up from the ground. He explained that there was a misunderstanding. He was here to negotiate, having no interest in becoming the next duke. Lucius sneered, asking if he really expected anyone to believe that. Before Arthur could respond, a fist slammed into his face. The punch hit him squarely in the nose, sending him flying. Cedric panicked, calling out to his young master in terror. Arthur was flung across the room, trailing a golden aura. The fourth son demanded to know if Arthur thought he'd believe him. He pointed out that Arthur must have forgotten what happened 2 years ago, so he was going to refresh his memory. He wanted to ensure Arthur never tried a stunt like this again. Wiping blood from his lip, Arthur stayed eerily calm. He knew Lucius was a master knight, a different breed of warrior entirely, far beyond anyone he had faced. Analyzing that terrifying aura, Arthur compared him to every elite knight he'd ever met. His brother was a true monster. Arthur reflected that luck wouldn't save him this time. His own speed was absolutely no match for someone like Lucius. He began to question whether he had pushed his luck too far this time, facing a power he couldn't control. Arthur wondered if he could truly reach the pinnacle of power by mastering the knightly arts, and if he did, could he finally deliver a sarcastic vengeance for his fallen grandfather? Gareth noted that his brother possessed both raw strength and sharp intuition, but watching this unfold, the youngest of the siblings, Alaric, seemed even more unsettled. Enraged by Arthur's sheer audacity, Alaric marched toward him as he struggled to stand, growling that it seemed the boy needed a few more broken ribs to learn his place. Alaric claimed that only pain would make him understand, but Arthur simply smirked, noting it was only natural for his brother to doubt every single word coming out of his mouth. Alaric didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, grabbing Arthur by the collar with a snarl, declaring he wouldn't believe a single lie and prepared to bury a fist in his face. But then Arthur's expression shifted into something sinister. "What a shame," he whispered, suggesting that if Alaric wouldn't listen, he'd just have to find a better partner. He mused about handing the forbidden codex over to Lady Selena, or perhaps their ambitious second brother instead, leaving Alaric completely stunned by the sudden turn. Alaric froze, his anger boiling over into a fresh wave of fury, as he realized exactly what kind of dangerous game Arthur was playing with the family legacy. Arthur wondered aloud what the fallout would be if he gifted that secret knowledge to their rivals, questioning if any of their siblings would actually let Alaric live in peace. It was a brutal point. Alaric was the High Duke's favorite successor, which meant his own brothers would likely hunt him down the moment they gained the upper hand. Fuming with rage, Alaric demanded to know if Arthur was actually daring enough to threaten him, especially considering the massive gap in their status. Our protagonist didn't blink, calmly stating that Alaric's very survival depended on this deal. This wasn't just some bluff, it was a literal death sentence if he refused. The weight of those words hit like a hammer, leaving Alaric standing there in a stunned, heavy silence, completely unsure of how to handle this version of his brother. Locking eyes with him, Alaric's face went dead serious as he asked, "Who are you?" He needed to know if the man before him was truly the pathetic Arthur he remembered. Behind them, Gavin felt his heart stop, terrified the entire charade was about to collapse, but he forced himself to stay silent as the tension reached a breaking point. Arthur met that gaze without flinching, staring down the monstrous young knight for a long moment before finally breaking the silence with a cold, mocking question. "Who else would I be if not Arthur?" he asked, pointing out that Alaric talked as if he held the key to his soul, when in reality he knew nothing. Alaric spat back that he knew him perfectly well, recalling how he had beaten Arthur like common trash 2 years ago, leaving him a trembling, traumatized wreck. Arthur conceded that those scars were real, but with a sudden, chilling intensity, he told his brother that there was a much deeper story beneath the surface. He asked Alaric a simple question. Aside from their bloodline and that one brutal day years ago, what did his brother actually know about the man standing here? In a voice that commanded the entire room, he questioned if Alaric knew his passions, his hatreds, or the real reason he had no interest in becoming the next High Duke. This hit a nerve, and Alaric snapped, asking if Arthur actually understood the dynamic between them, given how the rest of the family had branded him a lowly bastard. He pointed out that none of the noble brothers had ever given him a moment's respect, so why on earth was Arthur trying to negotiate with him instead of the others? To everyone's absolute shock, Arthur looked him dead in the eye and gave the simplest answer possible. "Because, Alaric, out of all of them, you are the best." Alaric was floored. The words struck him harder than any physical blow, leaving him trembling in a stunned silence as he fought back a sudden rush of emotion. All those years of being insulted and cast aside because of his own mother's status flashed before him, the crushing weight of being eternally alone and isolated. He had pushed himself through hellish training just to be seen, and now the recognition he craved was coming from the last person he ever expected to give it. Alaric realized he'd spent years assuming Arthur hated him for the past, but now, looking at his brother, his entire perspective began to shift in an instant. He glanced up at the sky, wondering if he was the one who truly needed to change, before letting out a sudden, boisterous laugh that broke the suffocating tension. "Fine," Alaric chuckled, telling Arthur he was actually willing to listen to the terms of this negotiation and see whatever crazy offer his brother had prepared. Arthur let out a small, satisfied smile. The hook was set and his plan had worked perfectly, setting the stage for the most important trade of his life. He prepared to lay out his price for the Forbidden Codex, but the scene shifts, and we suddenly find ourselves several hours later as the sun begins to set. Our protagonist is seen strolling back toward the estate alongside Gavin, humming a happy little tune as if he hasn't just narrowly escaped a brutal beating. Gavin watched the young master walk ahead with a look of pure disbelief, finally admitting to himself that what Arthur had just pulled off was nothing short of legendary. He'd been losing sleep wondering how Arthur would ever win over a warrior like Alaric, but the execution was completely different and far more brilliant than he'd imagined. Arthur's plan was flawless. He knew he had to play it perfectly because his brother was a combat genius, leading back to the moment he made his 3 specific requests. The first demand was simple. Alaric had to promise to leave Arthur in peace once he eventually took the title of High Duke and sat upon the throne. The second was pure practicality. He needed full financial backing, and Alaric agreed instantly, eager to hear what the final, most important request could possibly be. Arthur played it cool, acting as if the third favor was barely worth mentioning, before finally asking his brother to personally teach him the fundamentals of their family's sword style. Gavin had been terrified that asking for training would blow Arthur's cover as a fake, but Alaric didn't suspect a thing because his ego had been stroked so perfectly. By validating Alaric's strength and giving him the recognition he starved for, Arthur made his brother eager to teach him the basics without a single shred of doubt. But the real shocker came afterward. While Alaric was a certified genius who took 2 hours to master the codex, Arthur had memorized the entire thing in one go. Back in the present, Gavin could only shake his head, realizing just how lucky they were to have a master with such a terrifyingly sharp mind on their side. But get this, even Arthur, the kingdom's top genius, needed 2 whole hours to memorize the secret tome. But our boy Marcus, he memorized every single word after hearing it just once. Looking back now, he realizes just how lucky he was to have that edge. Gerald stayed by Lord Max's side, even though this knightly life wasn't what he'd originally planned. Still, he admits to his master that he's actually impressed. The plan was brilliant, but Gerald points out one major flaw. Max still handed over that legendary family grimoire to Julian. Our protagonist just smirks. He explains it's fine, because he didn't exactly teach Julian the right way. Confused, Gerald asks what his master means, and Max decides to let him in on the secret. He tells his loyal subordinate that he tweaked the instructions for his brother just a little bit. A small adjustment here and there. Every 13 or 14 characters, he changed the wording. Gerald admits he was terrified of being caught, but they managed to slip away without anyone noticing. Hearing this, Gerald realizes Max would never give up such valuable knowledge that easily. His young master is far more ruthless than he looks. He notes that if Julian makes one mistake with those flawed instructions, he'll lose his magic, or even his life. Looking at young Max, Gerald is genuinely unsettled. He remarks that his master is truly devilish. In complete and utter shock, Gerald can only think that his young lord is absolutely insane. Later, at the Order of the Eternal Phoenix, we see the elite mage Alaric deep in meditation. Suddenly, a staff taps against the stone floor. The Grand Master of the Order approaches his student. He mentions they haven't heard a single word from Selene since she left. The Master is furious. She failed her mission, betrayed Lady Seraphina, and exposed her, completely severing their ties with the powerful Seraphina family. Their reputation is in ruins because of her. Thus, he orders his prized disciple, Alaric, to find Selene and uncover the truth to restore their honor. Alaric, with a terrifying beast sealed in a pack on his back, agrees instantly and addresses the man before him as master. Later, near a dark forest, we find Selene's blood-stained hood. Alaric stands before the remains of his former companion, analyzing the grim scene. He reflects that Selene was one of the 3 most powerful mages within the entire order. For her to meet such a cruel death, something was seriously wrong. He uses a forbidden ability called soul fusion, forming a magical seal as a brilliant golden light erupts from his hands. He performs a ritual, invoking the authority of the North Star, and declares that everything that happened here will be revealed. A black mist begins to swirl. With one final hand seal, the mage completes the ritual and begins to see exactly what happened to his fallen comrade. Alaric sees everything unfold before his eyes, a horrific nightmare vision. He witnesses the moment Selene was hunted down by the Azure Phantom. He feels an overwhelming, crushing pressure. His expression, once filled with total confidence, turns to pure, unadulterated fear. He spins around in desperation, feeling the vision as if he were experiencing the attack himself. But then, the illusion finally shatters. All that remains is Seleni's torn hood. The mage can't believe what he saw. Was it truly the legendary azure phantom? Looking at the sky, he declares that he'll need to prepare as much as possible for the unexpected nightmare that's just caught him off guard. Elsewhere, the azure phantom herself is watching our protagonist as he trains. Max is following the movements from the stolen family grimoire. He moves with lethal precision. It's almost like he's dancing. He's practicing the high-level arts, and his form is already perfect. Every strike is majestic, executed with flawless technique. A simple punch carries an extraordinary amount of skill and sheer power. Watching this, the Phantom can only ask herself one question. What on earth is happening right now? This shouldn't be possible. She explains that when most people start learning the arts, they struggle with the basic fundamentals for years. It's a slow, painful process. You have to repeat the same movements thousands of times to become proficient. Yet, even though this was Max's first attempt, he hadn't made a single mistake. All he needed was to build up his muscle and keep at it. In truth, he didn't even need to practice the forms anymore. He'd mastered them. It wasn't an exaggeration to call the little devil before her a total genius. Confused, the Phantom admits she expected him to beg for her help. Not that she would have helped him, of course, but then she starts having some slightly embarrassing thoughts. She muses that if Max actually begged her, she might just assist him a little. Suddenly flustered by her own mind, she snaps back to reality. She wonders what she was even thinking. This sudden outburst startles Max, causing him to stop his training for a moment. Suddenly, Gerald arrives on the scene, summoned by his young master. He informs Max that he's here exactly as requested. Max cheers up, saying he wanted to ask his subordinate for a huge favor. We then transition to a new location, Silverstone Province. We see people crowding the cobblestone streets. At the Gilded Rose Tavern, Gerald is sitting in a chair, waiting for something while holding a scrap of paper. The confused knight wonders what this is all about. He recalls the moment he asked Max the same thing, but Max just gave him a cryptic answer. He'd simply said it was something he'd been searching for. Back in the present, Gerald thinks about his situation. The Gilded Rose is the only information network in the area, but they're bottom tier, so he's not expecting much. Frustrated, he wonders why he's going through all this trouble for a kid. Settling back into his chair, Gerald reflects on how he's turned into a loyal hound. He has to ask himself, when did that even happen? He's completely under the thumb of a little devil. Right now, Marcus knows the Whispering Ivy Society is the only spy network around. The problem? They're the absolute worst in the business. Total amateurs. You can't expect anything from them. Frustrated, Marcus wonders why he's even going through all this trouble in the first place. Sinking back into his chair, a dark thought hits him. He's become nothing more than a loyal hound. When did that even happen? On the other hand, Garrett has to admit the truth. It doesn't actually matter. He has no life to speak of. No goals, nothing. His parents dumped him as a kid, and he was raised to be a cold-blooded blade for hire. In an age of legendary heroes, he was basically forced into an early retirement. He eventually served under a man named Cedric, but Cedric was a total snake who treated him like a disposable tool. Garrett knows his current employer, Lord Maxwell, sees him the same way, just a weapon, but honestly, he isn't complaining. He wasn't exactly good at anything else. His only plan was to just drift. He knew the moment he stopped being useful, he'd be tossed aside again. Still, he tells himself life is better now. At least the workload is lighter. But Maxwell's recent moves are worrying. Dark, demonic rituals. And the young lord himself is living under a constant threat of poison. Garrett just shrugs it off. Not his problem. He'll just do what he's told. Suddenly, the door swings open. A short, heavy-set man enters with a stunning girl by his side. This is Gunter, the local informant and owner of the Golden Inn. Gunter waddles over, apologizing to Garrett for the delay. Word was this man came from a minor noble branch, but he was already stumbling drunk. Garrett spots the girl standing next to Gunter and demands to know what's going on. Gunter just shrugs, says she's a new recruit at the inn. Then, the creep starts making moves on her, asking Garrett if he thinks she's a beauty. Garrett doesn't bite. Coldly, he reminds Gunter this is a high-stakes mission for a powerful individual. He tells him to get the girl out. Gunter insists it's fine, trying to play it off. But Garrett isn't asking. He barks the command again. Leave! Reluctantly, Gunter tells her to wait outside. But as she turns to go, Gunter can't help himself. He tries to grope her, telling her to wait for him later. Garrett slams the table, fed up. But then, something happens that no one saw coming. The new recruit snaps. She spins around and slaps Gunter right across the face. Hard. The fat man is stunned. He starts screaming curses at her, but the woman's expression goes cold. She's done pretending. She rips off her wig, revealing her true face. Gunter keeps running his mouth, so she lunges forward, grabbing his hair. In one fluid motion, she leaps right over him, and in the blink of an eye, crack, she snaps his neck with terrifying precision. Dead, just like that. Gunter's life is snuffed out before he can even blink. The woman lands gracefully on the floor. She looks at Garrett and calls him Shadow 86. Garrett's blood runs cold. He draws his sword, demanding to know who she is. Before he can even process what's happening, she kicks a heavy table straight at him. He's pinned. No way to dodge. It's been a long time, she says, using his old rank from the guild. Then she flickers. A handful of sharp pins fly through the air, hitting Garrett and freezing his entire body in place. She sheds the rest of her disguise, revealing a sleek outfit underneath. She seems disappointed that Garrett, number 86, didn't recognize her. Meet 𝒆'𝒔, the Grand Master of the Flying Blades, one of the 4 legendary assassin guilds in the kingdom. Garrett is reeling. What is she doing here? She explains she's the sole granddaughter of the former Grand Master. See, in the Flying Blades, there's a brutal tradition. To lead, you must complete 100 high-profile kills. 100 lives. That's the ritual to prove you're worthy of the crown. Once you finish, the entire guild officially recognizes you as their absolute leader. And with that title comes a legendary weapon, the Pin of Mercy, a secret, poisonous dart granted only to the Grand Master. We see 𝒆'𝒔 now, casually helping Garrett pull the paralyzing pins out of his chest. Garrett's mind is racing. The fact that she has that weapon, it means she actually did it. She's the leader, something he thought was impossible. He remembers 𝒆'𝒔 as the only real heir to the guild. She was talented, sure, but she had one major flaw. Her personality was absolutely explosive, pure chaos. Everyone assumed she'd never finish those 100 kills, not with her stubborn streak and that irritating attitude. He remembers how arrogant and troublesome she used to be, watching her closely as she works. Suddenly, *rip. 𝒆'𝒔 yanks the last needle out, making Garrett wince in pain. She smirks, calling this a pleasant surprise. Garrett agrees, calling her Miss, but he hits a nerve immediately. She snaps back instantly. It's Grand Master now. She demands the respect her new title carries. Garrett sighs inwardly. He knew this would happen. Her personality, yeah, it's actually gotten worse. 𝒆'𝒔 narrows her eyes. She asks if his retirement has made him forget his place. Quickly, Garrett drops to one knee. Grand Master, he says, but 𝒆'𝒔's still fuming that she had to remind him. After a tense moment, she finally cools off. Better, she says, but Garrett, he's just left standing there, completely lost. Her voice drops, sudden and cold. She explains she was originally hunting for the firstborn of House Valerius, expecting a pampered noble, but decides Cedric will have to do for now. Cedric stands there, completely lost. As Lady Seraphina mentions, she has fresh intel on what happened to the Order's elite blade, 𝒉la's. The name hits him like a physical blow. He immediately realizes she's talking about the guard he knew as 𝒉la's, the failed assassin. Seraphina confirms the news. 𝒉la's botched his mission. Cedric's mind races to the ironclad law of the Order of the Silent Talon. It's simple and brutal. If you draw your blade for a contract, you either finish the job or you don't come back. Serafina admits Silas was a top-tier killer, and honestly, she never expected a veteran like him to mess up this badly. Then she drops the real bombshell. She's here to take the head of the third son, Lord Alaric, and finish what Silas started. Cedric is paralyzed with pure shock, his mind reeling as he imagines the absolute bloodbath this is going to trigger. Later that evening, a stunning rainbow stretches across the sky over the Iron Manor as the sun finally begins to set. Out on the training grounds, the spectral Lady Alara watches our young Lord Alaric, who seems completely lost in his grueling drills. Getting bored of the silence, the spirit finally snaps, asking just how much longer he plans on swinging that sword. The sudden interruption breaks Alaric's focus, and looking at the twilight sky, he's startled to see it's already nearly dark. He agrees it's time to call it a day, and suggests they go grab some dinner, a suggestion that earns a warm, eager smile from the spirit. Cut to inside the manor, where someone is absolutely inhaling their food with zero manners, eating like their life depends on every bite. Alaric just sits there calmly, flipping through an old book and ignoring the meal, while the girl next to him is in a literal food coma of joy. She finally finishes, taking a breath and shouting about how incredible the meal was. Alaric looks up from his pages, a bit curious, and asks if the food was really worth all that drama. The woman just cracks open a bottle of fine wine and tells him that eating is one of life's greatest sins, something he'll understand when he's older. It turns out Lady Alara had possessed the body of one of the estate maids who'd brought the tray in a few days ago. The spirit was clearly having the time of her life, but suddenly, the hand holding the wine bottle starts to tremble violently. Dark, bruised veins begin spiderwebbing across her skin, a terrifying sign that the human vessel is rejecting the spirit's massive power. Alara realizes with a hiss of annoyance that this fragile body can't even hold her essence for 15 minutes. Alaric watches the scene play out, noting that a commoner's body just isn't built to handle a high-level entity like her. The blonde spirit finally abandons the maid's body and floats down next to him, glancing at the book he's been studying so intently. She notices he's deep into a volume titled The Forbidden Summoning Rites of the Six Masters, and she's surprised by his interest in the dark arts. Alaric admits it's fascinating. Out of all the rare texts she snatched from the Obsidian Library, this one is easily the most intense. He's about to ask something about the spirits of the dead when a sudden, icy chill runs straight down his spine. He goes dead silent, his entire body tensing as he tries to lock onto a strange sensation in the air. With a look of pure steel, Alaric pivots toward the door, sensing a lethal, murderous intent lurking nearby. Lady Alara is actually impressed. She can see his instincts are sharpening to a razor's edge. But Alaric's face pales as a thick, crushing energy begins to fill the room like a physical weight. Elsewhere in the manor, Cedric is nervously handing over a set of servant robes to Serafina, telling her it's the standard maid's uniform. Serafina takes one look at the rags and scoffs, calling them hideous and making it very clear she won't be wearing that garbage. At this point, Cedric is spiraling. He can feel the entire situation slipping out of his control and heading for a cliff. He bites his lip, his mind looping the same terrifying thought. If this woman is really the head of the assassins, she's a monster. He figures she's likely reached the peak of the supreme level, a tier of power most knights only dream of. The second she finds out he betrayed her brother, Silas, he knows his head is coming off. He tells her he'll wait outside the door while she changes, but Serafina isn't done playing with him yet. She leans in with a shameless grin, teasing him and asking if he'd rather stay and watch the show. She starts pulling at her collar, claiming a chance like this is a once-in-a-lifetime deal for a guy like him. Totally flustered and turning bright red, Cedric fumbles for words and practically trips over himself to get out. When he finally dares to look back, Serafina is doubled over laughing, mocking him for being so easy to rattle. Still, she actually thanks him, admitting that getting inside the Iron Manor was only possible because of his help. Cedric just mumbles that it was nothing, putting on a mask of fake loyalty and acting like a devoted soldier. He tells her he's only doing this to get revenge for his fallen brother, but inside, he's just praying he lives through the night. Beatrice looked at Arthur Thorne with a smirk, telling him that even in retirement, having a veteran like him was like having a whole battalion at her back. She played the part perfectly, whispering about how much she valued their bond and trusted him above all others. But then betrayal. Just as Arthur turned to leave, a volley of paralyzing needles slammed into his back, locking his muscles instantly. Beatrice's face went cold. She admitted every sweet word was a lie, just a script to keep him compliant until she could strike. She walked toward him, mocking his perceived loyalty. If he didn't avenge his fallen comrade earlier, it meant his soul was already bought by someone else. She laughed in his face, calling it pathetic that a washed-up, failed knight was still trying to play the hero. To her, he was just a piece of incompetent trash who had crawled into retirement because he couldn't hack it in the real world of shadows. Arthur lay there, frozen and shattered, wondering how he could have been so blind to her obvious act of friendship. He cursed his own stupidity for letting his guard down, just because she showed him a bit of kindness. Beatrice didn't stop, sneering that despite his gray hair, he was still the same brainless idiot he'd always been. She leaned in close, her expression twisting into something truly demonic as she asked if he'd ever actually learned a single lesson in his miserable life. Her verdict was simple. Irredeemable garbage like him didn't deserve a second chance, only a cold grave. Arthur's mind raced through his failures, the death of the true young lord, the betrayal of Lord Alastair. It all felt like a nightmare. But deep down, he knew the truth. He wasn't a victim of fate, he was just too weak to change anything. Beatrice drew her blade, coldly explaining the cover story. Arthur Thorne killed the young heir to avenge Alastair, then took his own life. That was her perfect alibi. As she raised the steel to finish him, Arthur could only think about what a miserable end this was. Then, boom, the wall exploded inward. A hand reached through the rubble as Julian Blackwood unleashed a terrifying binding ritual. Beatrice's knife was ripped from her grip by unseen forces, flying straight into Julian's hand as he caught it effortlessly. He stepped through the ruins of the wall, leaving both the traitorous lady and the dying guard in an absolute state of shock. Arthur stared at his savior, tears of pure relief hitting the floor. Maybe this demon of a man wasn't so bad after all. Julian looked down at him and asked if his guard was in trouble, and for a split second, Arthur felt a spark of genuine hope. But Beatrice wasn't done. She lunged, grabbing Arthur by the collar and pressing a jagged blade right against his windpipe. "Don't move a muscle," she hissed at Julian, threatening to open Arthur's throat if he took even one single step. Silence filled the room. Arthur felt his heart hammering against his ribs, fearing the worst was yet to come. He knew Beatrice had likely scouted Julian, probably underestimating him as a mid-tier brawler at best. But after seeing that telekinetic display, she finally realized she was staring at a transcendent master, and she was terrified. There was just one problem Beatrice didn't realize. The boy standing in front of her was rumored to have no heart at all. Julian didn't stop. He raised the knife like a professional executioner and started walking toward her with zero hesitation. Arthur closed his eyes, certain that Julian was going to sacrifice him just to get a clean shot at the traitor. But then, Julian did something that made everyone's jaw drop. He tossed the knife aside, letting it clatter uselessly onto the floor. In a shocking show of mercy, the demon of Blackwood demanded that Beatrice let his friend go. Beatrice froze, unable to process why a man with Julian's reputation would ever disarm himself for a mere servant. Julian gave her an ultimatum: release Arthur Thorne, and she could walk out of the castle alive and forgiven, just this once. He played it off as a whim, claiming it would be a hassle to replace Arthur since there was still so much work to do. Arthur couldn't believe it. This cold-blooded monster was actually putting his own life on the line to save a failed knight. The tension was thick enough to cut. Beatrice snarled, refusing to back down and demanding to know who he thought he was. As the leader of the Raven Guild, her pride was wounded. She couldn't stand being ordered around by a bastard like him. She sneered, telling Julian that if he really wanted the guard alive, he'd have to get on his knees and beg like a dog. For a long, heavy moment, they locked eyes, a standoff between a desperate traitor and a silent power. Then, Julian actually began to lower himself, looking like he was genuinely going to humble himself to save Arthur's life. Beatrice's eyes widened in triumph, convinced she had actually broken the great Julian Blackwood. Psych, it was a trap. Julian lunged from the half-kneel, snatching his blade and screaming a command to his phantom wraith. Out of thin air, a ghostly hand manifested, and a pool of cursed blood erupted from the floor beneath Beatrice's feet. The spirit revealed its true, terrifying form, unleashing a wave of power that targeted the traitor with surgical precision. With a violent surge of energy, the wraith slammed into them, blasting Beatrice back while shielding Arthur from the lethal impact. Across the room, Lady Catherine was completely lost, unable to grasp what was happening because the Azure Phantom remained invisible to her. She geared up to strike back, but the source of the chaos vanished in a heartbeat, gone before she could even blink. The Azure Phantom flickered back into view, mocking her. It knew Catherine had reached the high night tier, letting her sense energy even if she was blind to the spirit itself. But Catherine missed one fatal detail. Lord Alaric was still right there, lurking in the shadows of the chamber. Suddenly, Alaric appeared directly behind her, blade ready. Catherine spun around just in time, but she was wide open. Clang! Alaric's dagger slammed into her weapon, sent it flying, and Catherine scrambled back to put distance between her and the madman. No time to waste. Alaric thanked Sir Galahad for his return and immediately began pulling the paralyzing stingers from his soldier's body. The pressure was getting to Catherine. She was visibly shaking now, her mind racing to solve the mystery of this invisible force. She could feel a strange, heavy mana in the air, but saw nothing. Was Alaric using some kind of forbidden sorcery? Then she remembered the dagger throw. Wait, Alaric's raw physical power? It wasn't at the Master Knight level, not even close. She realized he was weaker than he looked. If she was going to end this, she had to strike now before his luck changed. Catherine pulled a jagged, dark relic from her back. Galahad's eyes widened. He recognized it instantly as the stinger of Death's pinnacle. She aimed the lethal artifact, ready to pin Alaric to the wall. Alaric, unaware of the relic's nature, started his blood-binding ritual, warning her that her next move would be her last. Catherine didn't flinch. She launched the stinger. Actually, she spat, this plan is perfect. Alaric tried to use his ritual to seize the weapon midair, but something went horribly wrong. He couldn't move. The stinger didn't even slow down. It was a unique, one-shot weapon designed for one thing, piercing through mana without resistance. It didn't matter how much power Alaric had. The stinger was built to ignore every bit of it. The Azure Phantom panicked. Its favorite human was seconds from death, and it lunged forward, desperate to save him. Too late. The stinger was inches from Alaric's heart, but at the very last second, Galahad threw himself into the fray. He shoved Alaric out of the way, taking the hit intended for his master. Both Catherine and the Phantom froze in total shock. Why would he do it? Why sacrifice himself? The stinger buried itself deep into Galahad's chest with a sickening thud. The force of the impact sent him reeling back, crashing hard against the cold stone floor. And for the first time, the cold, ruthless Lord Alaric looked genuinely terrified. He stared at his loyal protector, Galahad, bleeding out after taking the blow meant for him.